Episode 361. Impressive New Student. Even Elijah was stunned for a long time before he finally let out a sigh, laughed, and felt immediately relieved. No wonder when I told her in the afternoon that she couldn't join, she just remained calm. It turned out she has her own project already, the ICNE Finals. That new student is pretty impressive. It doesn't matter even if she doesn't win an award. Fortunately, I couldn't invite her to do our research project. Otherwise, we might have hindered her instead of helping. Just participating in this competition final was the dream project of the world's top graduate students. Elijah wanted to ask if Bessy needed an assistant herself or a part-time worker. Turning back to his workbench, Mr. Rostron slightly nodded and uttered rare words of praise. It's indeed impressive. Other than sneering, Sarah couldn't say a single word. She originally thought Bessy was anxious for a review and desperately wanted to join their research project. Thus, she had tried her best to block her. But who knew she already had a project, and it was even the ICNE. Since Bessy had said it herself, she didn't think it was a lie. In terms of popularity, although the project she was doing with Elijah was good in all aspects, compared to Bessy's ICNE project, it was basically negligible. She pursed her lips and felt a strong jealousy gnawing at her heart. She was speechless. This wasn't a comparison on the same level at all. Bessy was unaware of Sarah's thoughts as she left the laboratory. Towards the end of December, Evanston had seen its first snow. The snowflakes weren't particularly dense and fell rather slowly. They were rather big and melted when they hit the ground. Michael was standing under the streetlight, looking down at the time on his watch. His figure was slender, and a few snowflakes had landed on his body and head. The scattered snow brought a warm tone to the cold illumination of the streetlights. He reached out to brush the snowflakes off his shoulder, but paused when he saw Bessy. Once she walked over, he reached out to bring her into his embrace. Putting his cold hand at the back of her neck, he released it after a second and smiled. Are you cold? No. Bessy nodded towards the car, which wasn't turned off and had the heat still running. Once he got into the car, she asked how long he had waited outside. 10 minutes. Michael drove the car onto the main road and glanced at her sideways. It had suddenly snowed this evening, so fewer people were on the road. Without traffic, it would take them a few minutes less than usual to get home. Bessy nodded, resting her hand by the window and propping her chin up, deep in thought. The laboratory was now doing Mr. Rostron's research, and she would have her own research later. It was impossible to bring back the original radiological researcher, though she might return later. Thinking about this, she couldn't help but lean against the door and stare at Michael, deep in thought. They returned to the Highline apartments. Rosemary was in the hall with a computer on her lap, but she immediately put it aside when she saw Bessy. Bessy, you're back? Marvin also stood up from the wooden table and greeted Bessy and Michael. After taking off her shoes at the entrance and putting aside her backpack, Bessy greeted Rosemary. Michael lazily stepped into his furry slippers. By the way, Bessy, this is your package. Rosemary handed her the long box on the table, pointed to the inscription on it, and asked, What's this word? Bessy looked down at it and pursed her lips. Then she tore off the loosely attached note and threw it into the trash can. Clean and neat. My friend is foreign and can't write English well, she answered. Rosemary nodded. No wonder. She had tried to decipher it for the whole day to no avail. Bessy tore at the package. Marvin immediately went upstairs, brought back his gardening scissors, and asked her to use it to cut through the tape. Miss Miller, what did your friend send? Probably a painting? Bessy unwrapped it carelessly. Sitting opposite her, Michael glanced at her package and raised an eyebrow. There were 2 words on the box. Your friend is from abroad? He leaned on the sofa. One of the stamps was from abroad. Bessy nodded and tore off the tape. Why wasn't it checked if it came from abroad? Rosemary crossed her legs and looked at the package curiously. Marvin had a rather good memory and suddenly came to a realization. Miss Miller has a war reporter friend. A war reporter? Rosemary was surprised. That's impressive. War reporters weren't ordinary people. As the 2 of them talked, Bessy had already opened up the big cardboard box. Inside were 3 boxes. One was a rectangular antique wooden gift box, and the other two were small wooden boxes. Michael glanced at them and recognized the rectangular wooden box as the type that held paintings. He casually said, "You even prepared gifts?" It went without saying who these were for. Bessy nodded absent-mindedly and opened the delicate small mechanism on the outside of the rectangular box in order to lift the lid. Inside was a rolled painting with a slightly yellowish tinge. Rosemary had also collected a few paintings for Joshua before and immediately recognized it as an antique. Seeing Bessy move it casually, she quickly said, "Don't open it casually. Be careful not to damage it." Bessy put it down and closed the lid. Rosemary pointed to the other two boxes. "What are those?" Bessy didn't know. She only asked Giant Crocodile for one painting. Wondering about it, she reached out for one of the wooden boxes. Inside was a blue hairpin with fine diamonds and gold inlaid on it. It was obviously well preserved, with bright colors and fine craftsmanship. As a layperson, she couldn't tell what type of hairpin it was. She casually took it out and played with it in the light. "It's not as heavy as it seems," she indifferently commented. Beside her, Rosemary shifted her gaze from the hairpin to Bessy and stared at her in shock. "Your friend sent you this?" Bessy squinted and replied to her, "I guess I'd call him my brother." "Brother?" Michael glanced at her. Rosemary was also stunned. "Your brother gave you an antique diamond hairpin, and one so well preserved? Are you sure this is your brother?" "These are diamonds?" Bessy hadn't expected Rosemary to ask so many questions, and she handed the diamond hairpin casually to her. "Take it if you like it. My friend has a lot more." Bessy's tone was nonchalant. She had a good memory, and although she didn't know what this was called, she remembered seeing several of such hairpins in Giant Crocodile's collection. She wasn't interested in this and had studied neither archaeology nor antiques. Seeing that Rosemary seemed to know about these things, Bessy just tossed it into her hands. "This is preserved very well." Michael, who had studied archaeology and restored ancient cultural relics before, lightly looked at the hairpin as he brushed his fingers over the celadon-colored teacup in his hand. "The clarity is so flawless. It's one of the best I've seen. Take it, sister." Items like this had already lost their tradition. All that remained were preserved antiques. But because of how long ago they were made, many had lost their luster. However, the one from Bessy's box was exquisite and rare, and many collectors wouldn't even show it to other collectors. Rosemary hurriedly tried to hand the hairpin back to Bessy. "No, I can't accept this." This thing was priceless, and the value was too high. Even if Bessy didn't know much about it and didn't care, Rosemary would still never accept it. Michael coldly glanced at her. "You don't like it?" Tilting her head, Bessy glanced at Rosemary, whose cold white fingers had paused. "If this thing stays with me, I'd always be worried that I'd lose it." Marvin raised his hand and honestly said, "Miss Miller has a pink diamond that rolled out of her suitcase one day. I picked it up." Rosemary was speechless. She finally accepted the little diamond hairpin. As for the second wooden box, it was much more normal and contained a pearl only a little bigger than usual. Rosemary sighed in relief. At the same time, inside the Clark family house, Joshua ate half a serving of vegetables with a radiant face. Aaron put down his bowl at the dining table and looked at him. "Dad, what's the happy event?" "Nothing much." Joshua picked up the digestion tea next to him, took a sip with lowered eyes, and slightly relaxed his imposing expression. His shrewd eyes couldn't hide the hint of joy inside. "Bessy is coming to visit the day after tomorrow." Although Bessy had been in Evanston for so long, Aaron had yet to find out her details, so he thought she was probably very well protected by Michael. He only knew her last name and that Joshua and Rosemary called her Bessy. He didn't know anything else. Aaron didn't bother to investigate if it was possible to find out more. He didn't want to waste too much energy on a woman from the outside world. But judging by Joshua's expression, he seemed to like her very much, and his mood had been better recently. Aaron faintly looked away and nodded without saying anything. After the meal, Joshua went to play with his parrot while Aaron returned to his wing. "Mr. Clark, the day after tomorrow, all the Clark family's managers, big and small, will return to celebrate Joshua's birthday. The subordinate bowed respectfully. I heard that Captain Baldwin is coming too. Joshua was getting older and was in poor health. He always relied on medicine from the research institute to continue his life with the daylily, though his expected lifespan was decreasing. Thus, regardless of whether it was a big birthday, managers big and small would come back to celebrate. Aaron paused, standing by the window, deep in thought. I'll see Captain Baldwin myself the day after tomorrow. Yes, sir. The subordinate finished speaking, but didn't leave. After hesitating for a while, he said, About this Miss Miller that Joshua talked about. Don't worry. Aaron's voice was light. It's good that Michael brings her back, so everyone can be here and witness how he has succumbed to beauty and seduction. Then, we will see if he's considered suitable to be a patriarch. His voice contained a hint of ridicule. Because of the security guard, Michael had gradually risen in popularity among the Clark family. Aaron was worried about this, but Michael had just helped him out. The matriarch of the family naturally had to be one of comparable strength. Once Michael brought this girl back, he would lose at least half of the people's support. Episode 362, A Once-in-10-Year Opportunity. It was Saturday. Many netizens were looking forward to 24-Hour Idol at 8 p.m. Although Bessy wasn't on the show anymore, Rosemary still watched it because of her brother. She had never met this brother before. In the Bright family's house, Samuel was lying sideways on the sofa, the studs on his ears reflecting cold light. At 8 p.m., he picked up the remote control and switched to the live broadcast. Bessy wasn't there today. The comments section finally returned to normal. Welcome to 24-Hour Idol. Production crew, I was put in a spot. I can finally show 24-Hour Idol. Cry, cry. However, halfway through the show, everyone watched as Tucker solved the Lubin lock without blinking. Ha 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 ha, look how stunned Zeke and Noah are. Screenshot it. Turn it into a GIF. Little nephew, didn't expect it. Okay, everyone, welcome to 10-Hour Idol. The production crew is like, ? Production crew, today is another difficult day. Smiley face. Asking the production crew in a lowly manner, why don't you decrease the number of IQ questions? Don't you want your program to last longer? Samuel had already been defeated after seeing Tucker read the difficult book in the school doctor's office and wasn't surprised to see this scene. Behind the sofa, a woman in pajamas and a facial mask came over and grabbed a few purple hairs on his head. Samuel, haven't you washed out your purple hair yet? Crap, Mom, be gentler. Samuel pulled away and introduced the show to his mother. Let me show you the brother and sister. He reached out and pointed to the TV. The TV happened to show Tucker's cold little face and dark eyes. Samuel's mother took a look and stood there staring at him for a while. Seeing that Samuel was about to slip away, she reached out to grab his collar and gently said, Do you know this kid? I won't hit you. Tell me. Certain that he wouldn't be hit, Samuel sat down on the sofa. I already told you. He's a boy I know. I've told you so many times. You mean Bessy's brother? Samuel's mother asked condescendingly. Samuel looked up and waved his hand with great pride. Of course. Do you know them? I want to meet them. Samuel's mother glanced at him. Samuel murmured, Meet her? She won't even dare to answer my phone call. Shit. Mom, I promise you, I'll call her. Make an appointment, I promise. On Sunday, Rosemary came to pick Bessy up at the Highline Apartments at 8:30 as agreed. Today was Joshua's birthday, but it wasn't a big birthday, so he didn't accept gifts from other families and just held a large family dinner. Rosemary wore a white rose-collared shirt and a red ankle-length skirt with a casually styled cashmere coat. She knocked on the door and Bessy opened it. Rosemary stared at Bessy's black clothes and was stunned. Brother, are you so poor that you can't afford clothes? She turned to Michael. Michael lightly glanced at her. You only rely on fancy clothes. Rosemary was speechless. What didn't Michael understand? Rosemary drove by herself today. She pointed Michael to the driver's seat and pulled Bessy to the back. Marvin drove over in another car. After briefly giving Bessy an overview of the Clark family, she leaned forward towards Michael again, lowered her voice and whispered, It's a courtyard house, but there's an old building not far from the back door. A lot of people are coming today, so it might be too tiring to finish viewing it in a day. It'll be better if you can stay. The Highline apartments were quite far from the old house. It was the weekend, so there wasn't a traffic jam on the road. They entered the Bluestone Road after an hour and finally stopped in front of the thick and simple gate with 2 stone lions. Michael pulled out the keys and got out of the car. At the same time, inside the Clark family house, a few butlers had already arrived in the lobby at the end of the corridor. Aaron had gotten up early today and was accompanying these butlers to drink tea. Simons hurriedly came from the lobby, his expression excited and happy. Realizing there was someone in the lobby, he paused halfway and very politely greeted Aaron and the others. As Joshua's confidant for decades, even Aaron had to show him respect. The butlers quickly stood up and greeted him. "Simons, what are you in a hurry for?" Aaron put down his teacup and looked at him, puzzled. Simons bent down slightly, holding a notebook. His old eyebrows couldn't hide the joy in his eyes. "Miss Miller is here. I'm going to greet her." After speaking, Simons greeted several butlers and directly walked outside. He bypassed 2 long corridors and saw the people walking in through the gate. He put the little notebook in his chest pocket, then stepped forward and smiled brightly. "Miss Miller." Then he greeted Rosemary and Michael. "You came just in time. Let me take you to the courthouse to see Joshua. He has been talking about you all morning." Simons turned sideways and led the way. Today was a big day, and many people from the management level in the Clark family had come back to celebrate Joshua's birthday. Joshua dressed at 8 a.m. every day and was already waiting in the main courtyard for all the security guards and other staff. Other than New Year's Day, the most lively day in the Clark family every year was Joshua's birthday. The whole Clark family was full of jubilation. Simons led the way while Bessy walked beside Michael, looking at the painted walls along the corridor, embracing the simple and heavy atmosphere. The Clark family had only opened up the front half of the big courtyard house. The back half was just decorated to entertain guests, but not fit for them to stay in. In 5 minutes, Simons led them around the corridors, one after another, to the courtyard where Joshua was. Joshua was wearing a dark blue outfit with the word Bliss on it. It was buttoned up all the way to the neckline, and his hair was meticulously combed. The silver strands mixed in with the black hair. His face was evidently old, but his dark brown eyes were still piercing and energetic. He was sitting on a black sandalwood chair, speaking to the main security guard with a majestic face. Although he was old, he was still imposing. He had a fierce presence, so the other security guards carefully considered each word he spoke. Not paying any attention to the conversations around him, Joshua held his white porcelain teacup and slowly sipped at his tea, looking outside from time to time. Not far away, he distinctly heard voices. "Sir." The security guard put down his teacup and was about to leave, but Joshua suddenly stood up and stared at the gates. His face was still imposing, but his originally sharp gaze had become much gentler. The security guard was stunned. He quickly got up and looked at the gate, wondering who on earth had inspired Joshua's drastic change in attitude. He was just thinking about this when Simons came in and bowed. "Mr. Clark, Rosemary, Michael, and Miss Miller are here." He turned and let the 3 of them enter. "Good," Joshua laughed, his face evidently joyous. "Sit, quickly." The security guard also immediately greeted Rosemary and Michael. He didn't dare to look at anyone else. Back in the lobby, after Simons had left, the other butlers exchanged glances. "Mr. Clark, that Miss Miller." Someone paused and looked inquiringly at Aaron. Why was Simons so anxious? He even went out personally to receive them? Picking up his teacup, Aaron casually said, "My brother randomly met a woman. You all know how much my dad adores Michael and how he lets him do whatever. Today is my dad's birthday celebration, and yet he still dares to bring her here." Hearing this, the other butlers exchanged glances. They had heard some rumors recently, but hadn't paid much attention to the gossip. It was normal for youngsters to mess around. Only when they were older would they naturally realize what was most suitable for them, and they would then listen obediently to their family's arrangement. But now, Michael actually brought his girlfriend here? A rumor had spread among the Clark family that this girl couldn't even study well. How was she worthy? To become the Clark family's young matriarch, she had to at least be like Aaron. He had to marry an appropriate match who could hold the atmosphere. If he married a petty and weak woman with no opinions, wouldn't they become the city's laughingstock? As for Michael's Miss Miller, no one was clearer than Aaron. He had a good relationship with Sherry, and he had heard from her, so he understood more information and had heard of her impoverished background. This kind of person was never cultivated, nor received any special training in etiquette like Rosemary had, so there was no way she could even hold the atmosphere. Someone came in from outside. Uninterested in the woman Michael brought back, Aaron just turned sideways slightly, lowered his voice, and asked his subordinates,
"Is Captain Baldwin here yet?"
He had waited from the morning until now, knowing that Captain Baldwin would surely come to celebrate Joshua's birthday. He had now waited a few hours without seeing him.
"Not yet."
The subordinate lowered his head.
"He will arrive soon."
Aaron looked away and slightly nodded. Since Captain Baldwin wasn't here yet, he wasn't anxious. Putting down his teacup, he stood up and turned very calmly to the other security guards.
"Shall we go and see the other staff?"
One person stood up and respectfully said,
"We're going to the main courtyard to meet Rosemary and Michael. Mr. Clark, do you want to come with us?"
Rosemary and Michael weren't at home very much, so the security guards only saw them several times a year. They definitely had to visit them now that they were here. Furthermore, they wanted to see what kind of person Michael had brought. After all, this Miss Miller had been discussed among the family for so long, but they had yet to meet her. With this opportunity, they were naturally very curious. Simons's attitude just now had also piqued their curiosity. Seeing them leave, Aaron shook his head nonchalantly.
"Everyone, go ahead. I'll go to the schoolyard."
The subordinate followed him to the door.
"Mr. Clark, why don't we go to the main courtyard to see Rosemary and Michael?"
Episode 363. Why were you looking for me?
"Nothing much to see,"
Aaron lightly said.
"Let's go."
He crossed the side of the room and walked to the school grounds behind the house. Aaron was anxious to see Captain Baldwin and was uninterested in seeing the woman who Michael brought from wherever, and the few butlers in the lobby waited for Aaron to leave before heading to the main courtyard.
"Michael has always acted strangely. I'm curious about what kind of woman he brought."
The butlers talked while walking towards Joshua's courtyard. They arrived at the main house within 3 minutes.
"Mr. Clark, Rosemary, Michael."
The butlers bowed at them in greeting. Then they straightened their backs and sat near the security guard. Glancing at the woman sitting beside Michael, their hands paused on the teacups. That woman was talking to Joshua in a calm, soft voice. Even though the entire lobby was full of older members of the Clark family, she didn't show any sign of stage fright. And her sitting posture was even a little arrogant. Her legs were crossed, her white and slender fingers holding a teacup. She half lowered her head, her eyebrows slightly raised, open and sharp. Having heard what Aaron said about the woman Michael brought with him, the butlers had already looked down on her. But now that they were sitting across from her, several butlers felt a certain degree of improvement in their minds about Miss Miller's image. Just her sharp aura that was neither humble nor arrogant in front of Joshua and the security guard was enough to make this change, let alone any other qualities. There were only a few prestigious ladies in the whole of Evanston. She wasn't the same as Aaron's description.
"Dad, you should greet the guests first. I'll take Bessy to see my wing."
Rosemary drank a sip of tea, afraid that Bessy would become impatient from hearing the greetings from the managers. In a good mood, Joshua waved his hands.
"Okay, you two can have fun with Bessy first. By the way, Simons, prepare a room for Bessy and take out the cloak from my warehouse. Rosemary, why don't you bring Bessy to see the school ground?"
If Rosemary was worried that Bessy wasn't accustomed to this type of scene, naturally, Joshua was too. After all, they all knew that Bessy was a researcher, and Michael had also told them that she didn't like to participate in relationships that were too complicated. He gave a few instructions to Simons before letting them leave. In the hall, the butlers raised their eyebrows. It seemed like Joshua really liked this Miss Miller. Rosemary took Bessy to her wing and explained a few things about the history of the house to her on the way.
"Don't listen to her."
Michael took a fox fur cloak from Simon's, then stepped behind Bessy and put it on her shoulders. He slowly tied it with his slender fingers.
How is it possible to have so much history? It has been renovated countless times.
About to argue, Rosemary suddenly felt her phone vibrate. She took it out to see a message. She frowned after reading it, then turned to Michael. Not regarding Bessy as an outsider, she lowered her voice and said in a serious tone,
Michael, Aaron has cornered that Captain Baldwin at the schoolyard. Do you really not plan to try to win him over?
No.
Michael stopped and glanced at her, his eyes cold like the fine pieces of ice and snow floating in the sky outside. Rosemary narrowed her eyes. This wasn't the first time she had heard Michael say this. She stared at him for a long time, waved her hand and gathered her coat around her.
Forget it. Even if you want to see him, he won't necessarily care about you. Aaron has tried to reel him in for several months to no avail. Michael, Mr. Clark wants you to come back,
said a servant on the opposite end of the corridor. Michael slowly nodded. He pulled his collar up and felt it was very troublesome to go back. Today, some of the older generations from the Clark family were back, and he had to go greet them one by one. He looked at Rosemary. She quickly encouraged him.
I'll take Bessy to my wing. You can come find us there later.
After Michael left, Bessy looked up, folded her hands in her cloak, and asked casually,
You were talking about Captain Baldwin?
You know Captain Baldwin? Rosemary looked back at her, not bothering to hide these family matters from her. She folded her arms and said,
He's a rookie who shot to fame in the Clark family's base in August. He achieved a lot in just a few months and is terrifyingly powerful. No other people in the base can exceed him. He has now climbed to the position in charge of the whole base, and he also has a clean background. So the Clark family is unanimously optimistic about him. To win his heart would mean winning the heart of the base.
This was no secret. Everyone in the Clark family knew it. Captain Baldwin was powerful and had been very prominent as a newcomer. He had even brought in a special group and made a lot of achievements in the past few months. The base had always placed importance on strength, and reeling him in was indeed equivalent to winning the hearts of the base. Rosemary couldn't help but sigh at the mention of him. Bessy was silent for a moment before she looked at Rosemary, her black hair draped around the shoulders of her cloak.
He sounds very powerful. He won this much while still in his young age and strength.
Rosemary sighed.
He'll surely be a general of the Clark family in the future. My eldest brother has a good vision.
Aaron had started reeling in Captain Baldwin so early.
Let's not talk about this. It's useless now.
Rosemary shook her head. Aaron had spent so much effort, only to fail at reeling Captain Baldwin in.
Bessy, let's go over here first. There's a red plum garden. You came just in time, as it snowed last night. Although it's not a lot, there's still some snow on the branches.
White snow on the red plums was the wonder of the Clark family's courtyard every year. The plum garden was very large, and most of the garden was just red flowers now, with snow dusted on the dark branches. The stone tables and benches in the plum garden had been cleaned, and there was also a teapot as well as 4 celadon-colored teacups. Rosemary took Bessy to sit in the plum garden for a while, and then they went into a tower next to it. The tower faced the plum garden. Behind the plum garden, they could see the school field. The Clark family school was located behind the back half of the courtyard. On Joshua's birthday, many young people gathered together there.
That's probably Captain Baldwin.
Rosemary took Bessy to the window and sat on the wooden table nearby, pointing to the most crowded group of people on the school field. Propping her chin up, Bessy had better eyesight and immediately saw Captain Baldwin. After being dismissed by Michael and coming to Evanston, Bessy had only met him once during military training when she had just started school. At this moment, she noticed that his skills hadn't regressed. She looked at him for a while before looking away, turning her gaze to her phone while listening to Rosemary talk. She received a message from Samuel.
Bessy, my mom wants to see you.
Bessy paused and sent back a question mark. Samuel very quickly replied to her.
She wants to see you after seeing Tucker on TV. I told you, we're fated with you.
His mom wanted to meet her after seeing Tucker? Thinking with the teacup in her hand, Bessy slowly recalled what Michael had casually mentioned to her. Thinking about it, she clicked on Zeke's profile and sent a message.
Does the Miller family have relatives with the last name Bright?
As for Samuel's message, she said she would consider it and then closed the message box, tapping her white fingertips on the wooden table and propping her chin up. She thought about when to return to 129 and check on the Miller family. Captain Baldwin was exchanging moves with people on the school ground. It was a 1-on-3 sparring match, and he put the young people down within a few moves. With his current strength, no one in the Clark family except Marvin was his opponent. The security guards stood on the edge with odd faces.
The Evanston base is indeed extraordinary.
Sir, what do you mean? One of the other security guards asked him. Shaking his head, he looked at Captain Baldwin's moves with serious eyes and couldn't help but sigh in amazement. Both Marvin and Captain Baldwin were so impressive. After Captain Baldwin finished the game, he looked at the crowd and still couldn't see Marvin. When someone asked him, he didn't make any moves and just glanced in the direction of the road. He took out his phone and asked Marvin,
"Mr. Clark, have you and Miss Miller arrived?"
Marvin didn't reply, so he first stuffed his phone back in his pocket. Aaron, who had been watching for a long time, said to himself,
"Captain Baldwin is indeed young and promising."
He walked over and invited Captain Baldwin to the plum garden in front of the schoolyard. Christopher had chosen Captain Baldwin in Austria because of his intelligence. He naturally figured out that Aaron was trying to reel him in.
"Mr. Clark, I have other matters to attend to, so I'll leave first."
Captain Baldwin rejected him calmly. Without having the chance to exchange a few words with him, Captain Baldwin left the school field.
"This Captain Baldwin is really difficult."
After he left, Aaron's subordinate lowered his voice and frowned.
"He's impenetrable."
"That's fine." Aaron stared at Captain Baldwin's back, and his frown relaxed again.
"That way I won't be afraid of him turning to my brother and sister for the time being."
Without Captain Baldwin here, Aaron set his eyes on Instructor Clark again. Instructor Clark belonged to the Clark family, and unlike Captain Baldwin, he respected Aaron a lot. Captain Baldwin walked out to the road. He looked through Twitter and saw that Marvin had sent him an address. Captain Baldwin's current status in the Clark family was high now, and in addition to Aaron, various hall owners wanted to win him over. He was well known in the Clark family, and when he randomly asked someone for directions, the man took him all the way to Marvin's residence. Episode 365. Bessy's Strength. Even Joshua glanced at him.
"Yes, indeed."
Putting down his phone, Aaron's eyes were filled with joy.
"Miss Flake just said she passed the 129's intermediate membership test. She'll officially become an intermediate member."
As soon as he said that, everyone in the hall exchanged glances. The security guard couldn't help but nod.
"I remember she was only admitted last year, but she has already become an intermediate member this year. This authority is second only to a few members, right? At Miss Flake's age, it's unprecedented in the 129.
Aaron lightly said. He glanced at Bessy and suddenly laughed.
"Speaking of which, the young lady next to my brother is only a few years younger than Miss Flake and is probably in Northwestern University. It's the same school as Miss Flake was in previously. How is it?"
Neither the people at the main table nor those nearby dared to answer. They all lowered their heads. Wasn't Aaron deliberately touching on a sore spot? As soon as Aaron finished speaking, the woman sitting next to him reached out and pulled him to her, lowering her voice. "Stop it," she said. She was his wife. Although she was from a prestigious family, she didn't interfere much with his affairs. At this interruption, Aaron couldn't help but frown and glance at her. Before the woman spoke, a girl walked over to the table from not far away and presented Joshua with a gift. "Happy birthday to Grandpa Clark. May you have today's glory forever." She couldn't help but glance at Michael out of the corner of her eyes. She was the head security guard's daughter. Because of her talent, she had trained at the base since a young age and was very valued by the Clark family. After handing the gift to Simons, instead of leaving, she looked in Bessy's direction. "Are you Miss Miller?" At the main table, the security guard's face darkened. "Renee." It sounded a little hostile, so Aaron no longer bothered with his wife's words. After all, it wasn't good to offend Joshua. He just looked up at the girl and kindly smiled.
"Don't be so fierce to the child. Renee, do you know this Miss Miller?"
In such a big family, some people naturally couldn't stand situations like this. Presumably, Michael bringing Bessy back today had broken a few people's hearts. Though Aaron showed kindness on his face, he was secretly extremely satisfied with the girl for bringing this up. Bessy turned to the girl. "Yeah, I'm Miss Miller." "Oh." The girl reached into her pocket, took out a piece of paper and a pen, and handed it to her. "Then can you sign this for me? I'm a fan of you and Zeke. Of course, I really like your brother too, but he's not as impressive as you." Rosemary, who had been about to speak, stared at the girl, speechless. Sitting in his chair, Joshua laughed.
"No wonder you came so early to give me my present. It turns out that you have an ulterior motive. Bessy, sign it for her."
Bessy took the piece of paper and signed it. Seeing Renee leaving with the signature in her hands, Rosemary finally realized that she was probably a fan of the show.
"You only want a signature, not a picture together?"
She laughed. "Can I?" Taken aback, Renee turned to Bessy again. Although her face didn't fluctuate, her eyes shone brightly. Rosemary leaned back in her chair and raised an eyebrow.
"I remember you're a senior in high school, right? Remember to learn from Bessy."
"No, I can't become the national top scorer." Renee shook her head and looked at Bessy with a little distress. "I only entered the top 10 in my midterm entrance exam, which is far behind Bessy's achievements. But I will work hard to get into Northwestern University's Science and Technology department." Most posts on Twitter had already been deleted, but the comments section on the previous 2 episodes had been rampant in discussing Bessy's scientific knowledge. After speaking, Renee politely nodded to those at the head table and then went to the table near the door where the youngsters had gathered. Many people in the hall had good hearing and could hear the excited voices there.
"You got it?
Let me see."
"Renee, you're too stingy."
At the main table, Aaron's lips twitched and he looked at Michael with feigned admiration.
"Renee just said that Bessy was the top scorer in the college entrance examination. There's only one national paper every year, and the top scorer last year, who I hear just entered the research institute, is a talent. Bessy, are you really the nation's final exams scorer?"
Joshua glanced lightly at him.
"Of course she's the nation's top scorer. President Flores himself came to find me for her."
Aaron had also heard of President Flores. He had always assumed that President Flores had been asked by Joshua to settle things for Bessy. But now, though it seemed he had indeed come for Bessy, his purpose had been completely different from what Aaron imagined.
"Oh."
Aaron nodded and poured himself a glass of wine, speechless. No title mattered as much as this. He was also very clear about the importance of being the nation's top scorer. There was only one of those every year. If she had enough time to grow, Michael's status was already rising in the Clark family, and now there was another problem in Bessy, who was winning the hearts of the young people in the Clark family. Aaron didn't manage to eat his meal. He remained in grave silence. After the meal, several more people handed gifts to Joshua. Most were packed in boxes and handed over with grandiosity. Simons and Joshua didn't open the gifts while the guests were still there. This was only a show of courtesy. Joshua asked Simons to take all the gift boxes back to his residence. Bessy's wooden box had already been handed to him by Marvin before the meal. After they finished their meal, the youngsters noisily went to the schoolyard, and some of them came over to invite Bessy along. Instead of following Michael and Bessy, Rosemary followed Joshua.
"Dad, when are you opening the gifts?"
Joshua liked antiques, so Rosemary naturally did as well. Every year, she collected all sorts of antiques for him. She had been curious about Bessy's wooden box for the whole 2 days already. With his hands behind him, Joshua glanced at her.
"Why are you so concerned about my gifts this year?"
He was in a good mood and flashed a rare smile when he spoke.
"I want to see the gift Bessy gave you."
At this moment, since there wasn't any security guards or managers talking to Joshua, she only lowered her voice a little. Upon hearing this, Joshua was taken aback and glanced at Simons.
"Bessy also gave me a present?"
Simons looked at his notebook.
"I've put it in your study already."
He had placed the wooden box given to him by Marvin into the study, knowing that Joshua would surely want to look at it alone. Joshua nodded and pondered.
"Let's go to my study first. Ask the manager to come get me if there's anything needed."
"Go check it out."
Leaving the hall, Aaron looked at his subordinate.
his expression extremely dark.
What's the thing with the variety show?
Renee and the other youngsters' reactions were too strange. Aaron looked in the direction of the main hall, his eyes deepening. The security guard had always been neutral, but because of his daughter and Bessy now, Aaron was afraid. Some others on the management level were also confused about the situation. Previously, Aaron never knew who the Miss Miller that Joshua always talked about was. But now that he did, it was an easy feat to investigate her. 24-Hour Idol was a show that had already exploded. Although the explosive enthusiasm from the first 2 episodes had long passed, the response was still fervent. Aaron naturally had his own network to collect information. In less than half an hour, those people not only checked the ins and outs of 24-Hour Idol, but also put together previous headlines about her. Standing in Aaron's study with a stack of documents, his subordinates seemed to be in a daze.
She's really the nation's final exam's top scorer,
Aaron asked.
Not only that,
the subordinate pursed his lips.
Sir, do you remember Mr. Grint, the person we found after checking with the White family in Austria?
Aaron naturally remembered and nodded. No one in Evanston was a stranger to the relationship between Mr. Grint and the Austria Association. Several big families in Evanston kept a check on Mr. Grint. However, there was too much news to report it all in real time. Usually, special intelligence officers were responsible for gathering the news stories, and they organized them so they could provide them as soon as the Clark family needed to know more about various news stories.
When we checked, we found that this program mentioned the Evanston Violin Association, so the intelligence agent mobilized Mr. Grint's information. This Miss Miller is the head student of Mr. Grint.
Evanston was too complicated to keep up with every major player. Other than the necessary things, Aaron rarely kept these kinds of things in mind. Otherwise, with so many families, he would have to remember too many random details about every master. Most of the information was only available when needed. He had paid attention to Mr. Grint and checked on him after the White family's return from Austria. However, at that time, he only checked on Mr. Grint. And as for his students, it really wasn't as important, so he naturally hadn't checked on it. But as soon as he heard this, his hands paused on the document. But the subordinate had yet to finish talking. It was fine when they didn't know Bessy was the Miss Miller that Joshua always talked about. But now that they did, they discovered a bunch of information added up.
Also, do you remember when we reported the situation of several laboratories to you?
At the end of November, Luke's entry into the research institute had caused disturbances in the laboratory. Rosemary and Aaron had heard their subordinates mention it before. As for talents like Luke, a few would pop up in Evanston every year, but there weren't many who could really make waves. Most families would choose to invest in and cast their nets for this rare outstanding person. After all, some of these people really accomplished a great feat later on, but some lost popularity halfway after offending people during their work. Because he had made waves in the laboratory, some people already had their eyes on Luke. However, he had only caused a huge wave among the research madmen of the Research Institute. In the eyes of those with real power in Evanston, his weight wasn't large at all. After all, he was still just a growing genius with almost no real power in his hands, and many of the families were still watching him. Episode 364. Someone else is coming too. Marvin was sitting in the courtyard with a simple long wooden box beside him. He was holding a soup spoon in one hand and drinking soup.
Mr. Clark.
Captain Baldwin respected him very much. Looking up, Marvin put down his bowl and turned to him.
Do you want to eat?
Captain Baldwin shook his head, paused, and asked,
Mr. Clark, when can I meet Miss Miller?
Marvin glanced at him.
I'll ask.
He took out his phone to call Bessy.
Miss Miller, where are you right now?
Bessy was casually following Rosemary to her wing, one hand on her cloak, the other holding her phone to her ear. I'm following Rosemary to her wing. Marvin glanced at Captain Baldwin.
Captain Baldwin wants to see you.
Bessy seemed to think about it for 2 seconds and asked Rosemary first before replying to him. Rosemary, is it convenient for a few others to come in? Looking up, Rosemary went into the courtyard first.
Don't worry, of course they can.
Okay, bring him to Rosemary's wing.
Bessy wrapped the cloak around herself. Putting away his phone, Marvin stood up with the wooden box, looked at Captain Baldwin and blankly said,
"There's still an hour left before lunch. Miss Miller is in Miss Clark's wing. I'll take you to see her now."
Captain Baldwin's eyes lit up, and he quickly got up from his chair.
"Thank you, Mr. Clark."
Marvin brought the bowl back to the kitchen, picked up the wooden box, and went with Captain Baldwin to find Bessy. Bessy and Rosemary had already entered the courtyard. The snow had stopped falling. Bessy sat in Rosemary's picturesque courtyard with her hands held up to the heater there. A middle-aged man entered and reported on Aaron's whereabouts.
Mr. Clark has exchanged a few words with Captain Baldwin, but they didn't advance to business talks. It seems like he failed to reel him in."
Rosemary asked someone to bring hot tea over and raised an eyebrow with a smile upon hearing this.
"My eldest brother must have sacrificed a lot to win over him. This Captain Baldwin is really difficult."
After a moment of silence, she shook her head.
"He hasn't been reeled in by my eldest brother yet, but it seems that given his character, he might end up standing on Aaron's side in the end."
According to Aaron's narrow mind, she sat across from Bessy while talking. Bessy held the teacup in her hand, her eyes drooping, remaining silent. Rosemary thought she was unwilling to listen to these things, so she changed the topic and smiled. "Is Marvin here?" The painting Bessy wanted to give to Joshua was with Marvin, so Rosemary thought he was coming over to give it to her. "Yeah," said Bessy casually, "but someone else is coming too."
"Who?"
Rosemary's interest was piqued. She slightly crossed her legs, sitting in a much more dignified manner than Bessy's lazy posture.
"Someone from the Clark family?"
Today was Joshua's birthday, so the entrance was allowed for the Clark family and their associates only. Looking up, Bessy casually said, "I guess."
"Really?"
Rosemary glanced at the door. Michael rarely hung out with people from the Clark family, other than the 5 brothers. When Bessy was doing military training for school, Joshua had gone to greet Instructor Clark. Rosemary honestly couldn't figure out who Marvin was bringing to see Bessy. Rosemary's wing was a little far from Marvin's courtyard. About 10 minutes later, someone knocked on the door.
"It's probably Marvin."
Picking up her teacup, Rosemary glanced at the door and said, "Come in." As soon as she finished speaking, someone pushed the door open. Marvin came in first. He was holding an old rectangular wooden box. A young man respectfully followed behind him. Rosemary wasn't interested in Marvin. Her eyes directly fell on the person behind him. Her tone was just as casual as she asked,
"Marvin, who is this?"
She was planning to ask who he had brought, but halfway through her sentence, Marvin stopped, and the young man behind him showed his face. He was a very thin young man who looked very clever. Captain Baldwin's reputation in the Clark family had risen, and the base had done a very thorough search for all his information. Basically, people in the Clark family had inquired about this young man, and Rosemary was one of them. She naturally recognized this young man standing behind Marvin as Captain Baldwin, the Clark family's rising star. Putting her teacup down on the table, she felt extremely surprised inside, but still retained her dignified attitude of the Clark family's only daughter. Sitting up straight, she looked over at the young man, and even though she appeared calm on the surface, her tone still betrayed her shock.
"Captain Baldwin?"
Marvin lightly glanced at her and then introduced the young man.
"Captain Baldwin, this is Miss Rosemary Clark."
Captain Baldwin hurriedly replied respectfully,
"Hello, Miss Clark."
Miss Clark was their boss's sister. He naturally respected her very much. After greeting her, he turned to Bessy.
"Miss Miller, I have completed all the exercises you gave me."
Speaking of this, his eyes lit up.
"When will you check them?"
Bessy took a sip of tea, looked at him, and nodded slightly. "No need. I saw you just now. You're making rapid progress." With Bessy's approval, Captain Baldwin straightened his back. He looked down and noticed her tea had run out. He quickly walked to her side and very skillfully poured her another cup of tea. He glanced at the color of the tea and knew that this wasn't the kind she liked. Looking around, he realized it wasn't a good place to make tea, so he finished filling the cup with tea that wasn't particularly good. Opposite Bessy, Rosemary, who was still sitting on a cushion on the stone bench, kept her perfect posture while holding her cup, speechless. Captain Baldwin's sudden emergence in the Clark family was regarded as the most outstanding development since the beginning of the year, and he was considered the most indispensable leader on the base. His importance was evident from how Aaron was relentless in trying to reel him in. But now? Could someone tell her what was happening now? Captain Baldwin was in front of her. What was he doing? Pouring tea for Bessy? And Marvin even seemed to know him? She felt her brain crashing. A slender figure came in from outside at that moment. It was Michael.
Let's go to the courtyard for dinner.
Michael stood beside them, glancing first at Bessy and then slowly turning to Rosemary. Expressionless, Rosemary just nodded. But instead of standing up, she told Bessy and Michael to go ahead. Michael and Bessy walked in front. Captain Baldwin was just one step behind them, and after greeting Michael with "Boss," he reported to him about the recent month's matters. After they had left, Rosemary was still sitting there with a dazed expression. Instead of immediately leaving, Marvin stopped for a while and sympathetically looked at her.
Miss Rosemary, are you okay?
Rosemary looked up, her dark eyes gleaming.
Do I look all right?
No, Marvin said honestly. Rosemary was speechless. It was cold in winter, so the tea in her hands was already cold. She drank it in one sip and then raised her head.
What does Captain Baldwin have to do with my brother and Bessy?
Her tone sounded like she was about to collapse. Marvin looked up.
Captain Baldwin also took care of Miss Miller previously, but he was a little weak at the time. After Miss Miller taught him for half a month, he could be brought out to meet people. Thus, Joshua sent him to the Clark family's base.
He realized Rosemary hadn't made a single sound for a long while.
Captain Baldwin has regressed a little recently,
he said.
Miss Rosemary, are we still not leaving?
Rosemary was speechless. All she could think was, shut up. The Clark family's banquets were held in a spacious main hall, which accommodated 200 people at the same time. Those coming now were all from the Clark family's management network. They each had their little groups and sat in factions, chatting. Aaron's subordinate came to his side and whispered,
Sir, we found Rosemary's subordinate in the schoolyard.
Narrowing his eyes, Aaron sneered.
She sent someone to spy on me or Captain Baldwin. Mr. Baldwin, I heard that Rosemary has advised Michael to visit Captain Baldwin more than once.
The subordinate put his hand to his mouth and lowered his voice.
Ridiculous. Doesn't she know who Captain Baldwin is?
Aaron lowered his eyes, hiding the disdain in them. After coming to the hall today, he heard a few managers discussing Miss Miller with a little bit of awe in their tones. He narrowed his eyes and thought for a while. Joshua was sitting at the main seat, greeting all the managers. He was wearing an expensive dark suit, looking full of energy and glancing at the door from time to time. When he saw two figures outside, his eyes lit up.
Bessy, come here.
Sitting next to him, when Aaron realized that the woman Michael had brought had arrived, he couldn't help but look up at the door. Bessy and Michael were just walking in. Their appearances were perfect. Michael had been full of a noble aura since he was young and still looked extraordinary. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gotten the nickname of the Clark family's crown prince in Evanston. However, the woman standing beside him wasn't inferior to him. Staring at Bessy, Aaron's hands paused on the table. This Miss Miller, other than her face, everything else was a great disparity from what he had heard. Joshua smiled and asked them to sit on his right. Their importance was evident. Not long after they arrived, Rosemary also came in. But her face looked a little strange and she talked less today. Although no one else noticed it, the people in the hall were quick to notice Bessy's importance to Joshua. After greeting him, they praised Miss Miller for her extraordinary temperament. All they talked about was her extraordinary temperament. There was really nothing else to say. After all, some of them had heard that Joshua had arranged Miss Miller's school matters for her. Sitting opposite them, Aaron listened to their flattery and couldn't help but sneer. His phone dinged. It was a message from Sherry. He couldn't help but laugh when he read it. At the main table, most of the people looked at him. The security guard glanced at him unhappily.
Sir,
he asked,
is there a reason to laugh?
Episode 366. Bessy's Friend. Other than Luke and the Research Institute, the families also paid attention to the assessments of several major laboratories each year. This year, with the news of the laboratory's assessment, Bessy, the newcomer who had caused a big commotion, naturally garnered their attention. Even Aaron's subordinate had mentioned it before. At that time, he had adopted a wait-and-see attitude, with the mentality of investing in Bessy in the future. Apart from other things, Bessy was indeed an outstanding new student at Northwestern University along with Luke. At that time, even Aaron had paid attention to talks of this new student, but she was just a youngster who had emerged, so he had only ordered his men to keep an eye on her. Upon hearing this now, he squeezed the document in his hands.
Are you saying that the student we were keeping an eye on is Miss Miller?
He remembered that previously his subordinate had mentioned the last name Miller, but he had been too busy with the White family's affairs and hadn't paid attention. The temperature in the study seemed to drop, and the subordinate lowered his head. After a long while, he slowly said,
Yes. Okay, her future has potential.
It would have been fine if Bessy was an ordinary person. Although her qualifications might attract his attention, it wouldn't cause much disturbance. After all, it wasn't easy to mix in Evanston's high society without a family background. But now, with her qualifications and Joshua's attitude towards her, within a few years, she would surely become a manager in the research institute. People at the management level were very different from ordinary researchers. Aaron clutched his chest, feeling like he couldn't breathe. Seeing that he hadn't spoken for a long time, the subordinate looked up and was shocked to see him holding his chest.
Sir, are you okay? I'm fine.
Aaron shook his head, putting his hands on the table with his lips pursed. It seemed like he had to hasten his plans. At the same time, Michael and Bessy were on the school grounds. Holding a halberd, Michael looked up at the eager eyes of the youngsters. He paused and seriously asked,
Are you sure you want to fight me?
He squinted at the halberd and raised an eyebrow. The group of young people nodded frantically.
Of course, when we went to the special training today, the first instructor said you broke the record.
Not far away were a bunch of onlookers.
Captain Baldwin, are you all right?
Someone saw his lips twitching. Captain Baldwin replied,
Yeah.
In the fighting ring, Michael gracefully raised the halberd and looked at the group of youngsters.
6 of you.
He looked around thoughtfully. After a minute, he spun the halberd and gripped it, took a few steps and plunged it into the fighting dummy on the school field. Wherever it passed, the group of people stepped aside hastily. Renee was standing beside Bessy and said, Sure enough, Michael is as powerful as the rumors suggest. Bessy was leaning against the weapons rack, wearing a white jacket, looking thoughtfully in Michael's direction. She'd never witnessed him fighting before, but just now, inexplicably, it made her feel a little familiar, but she couldn't pinpoint it. Bessy pondered this deeply. By the way, Bessy, Renee asked again, can I ask you a question? Sure. She looked away from Michael and smiled loosely at Renee. Renee's eyes widened. In 24-Hour Idol, why didn't you go to several of the mission's posts? Like shooting mission, I read on Northwestern University's forum that you shot 10 bullseyes during the military training. If you had gone to that mission, you would have gotten first place in the shooting level. And that violin level? You're obviously better than Ava. Renee became more excited. The drawing level as well. I'm sorry, but I even stalked your high school forum as well. Your painting on the board was really beautiful. So why didn't you go to that mission? She enumerated a bunch of possible missions. Then, she said regretfully, it would have been nice if you had participated in them all. Regardless of other things, she really wanted to see her shooting skills that were called God level by those who had been at the training base. If she had participated in that as well, her impact on the internet would surely be much larger than it is now, and she would surely shoot to crazy fame. Although, she was also very famous now. Because of this, Renee had felt regretful for a week. Folding her jacket, Bessy calmly answered, Because it wasn't in my character setup. Renee glanced at her curiously. Character setup? Nothing. Bessy straightened her back when Michael walked over. She coughed, turned to Renee, and repeated Rosemary's words. Learn well. Michael walked over while putting on his coat. He glanced at Renee and politely asked,
Is there anything else?
No. Renee took a step back. Nodding, Michael turned to Bessy. casually buttoning up the top button of his shirt with his fingers before pausing and asking her,
"Shall we go find my dad now?"
Touching her chin and thoughtfully staring at him, Bessy slowly nodded. She still had to go back to her research projects. The two returned the same way they'd come, passing through the plum garden. At this moment, most of the Clark family were either on the school grounds or chatting in the lobby to form connections with one another. On the way, it was rather quiet, and they didn't bump into anyone. In Joshua's study, Marvin had quickly followed Rosemary to see the painting. Simons carefully took out the wooden box. Marvin assumed it contained a painting that was carefully crafted, because Rosemary had mentioned it was a well-preserved antique. Joshua stared at the box for a long time and didn't dare to unlock it boldly like Bessy. Finally, he called the warehouse manager who was well-versed in such things.
"This is a mechanical lock."
The manager looked at it with bright eyes.
"I've only seen this kind of craftsmanship in history books."
He carefully took out the box, held it in his hand, and looked at it for a long time before opening the lock. Joshua and Rosemary sat in the sitting room, staring intently at him. Michael and Bessy came in at that point. Rosemary saw her and immediately pointed at the lock.
"Bessy, which of your friends gave you this? The manager said not many people have even studied this kind of mechanical lock craftsmanship. Has your friend studied it?"
Bessy didn't have any reaction upon hearing this. Lazily leaning against the study door, Michael glanced at her, his delicate eyebrows lightly raised. Both Joshua and Marvin turned their eyes away from the mechanical lock to look at her. "I don't know either." She took a step forward to look at the wooden box. She didn't know why Giant Crocodile had sent her something like this. It looked simple, but full of history. As soon as she finished speaking, the mechanical lock clanked as the manager opened it. Unlike Bessy, who had opened it roughly, the manager carefully opened the lock. He noticed it had been forcibly opened before. The break seemed very new, and he was heartbroken.
"The mechanical lock is missing a piece. Who was this ignorant?"
Marvin didn't speak. Rosemary didn't speak either. Lazily leaning against the door, Michael glanced at the manager and flatly said,
"Look at the painting first."
The wooden box was exquisite on the outside, but more exquisite on the inside. Its interior was covered with brocade, and the painting inside was rolled up like a scroll. The manager put down the wooden box and put on his gloves to prevent damage. Although he felt heartbroken by the mechanical lock, he realized that the painting in the delicate box was definitely not ordinary. He placed the picture on the long table and slowly unfolded it. It seemed to be a landscape painting. Marvin looked at the inscription in the middle and read the name,
"Mountains and Rivers of 1,000 Miles."
He looked at the red seal next to it, but couldn't read the handwriting properly, nor tell whose calligraphy it was. After reading it out, he realized that the three people in the room who knew these things best, Joshua, Rosemary, and the manager, were silent. He turned and asked the manager,
"Is there a problem with this painting?"
"No." He was in a daze.
"Then why are you—"
Marvin looked up.
"No."
Rosemary turned to Joshua.
"Dad, we have studied this painting before?"
Still staring at the painting, Joshua just said,
"Ah."
Michael approached, looking at the painting and lightly said,
"It's authentic. Dad, quickly put it in your private library."
He calmly raised his hand and looked at the time on his watch.
"We're in a hurry and we'll go back now."
Joshua seemed to be in a daze and just nodded. Michael glanced at him before leading Bessy away. Marvin also politely said goodbye to Joshua and Rosemary, but both of them ignored him. The three of them left. In about 2 minutes, Joshua was the first to react. He hesitantly looked at Rosemary.
"Your brother said that this is authentic, but I remember, wasn't this recorded at auction and included as a painting in Austria's History Museum?"
The manager also returned to his senses. He took out a special tool from his bag to examine the painting.
"You remembered correctly. According to the treasure records, Mountains and Rivers of 1,000 of Miles has indeed been in Austria's History Museum for many years."
After checking it for a long time, he took out his phone to take pictures to confirm with some others. He took a deep breath.
"This is indeed authentic."
He finally breathed out. He was not alone. Both Rosemary and Joshua had also been holding their breath.
"Rosemary."
After a long while, Joshua picked up his cup of tea and looked closely at the painting, his fingers slightly trembling.
Do you know who Bessy's friend is? How did her friend get the painting from Austria's History Museum?
Sitting to the side with a blank expression, Rosemary was silent for a long while before saying,
I want to know, too.
She remembered the hairpin and the big pearl.
Why does it seem like Michael?
The manager suddenly thought of something and turned to Joshua.
He seemed to be well-researched on these things and could tell at a glance.
He studied the restoration of antiques for a period of time. Rosemary said,
When he was 13 years old, one of my dad's antique pottery horses broke. He took a book and learned a bunch of skills in order to restore it.
Speaking of this, she couldn't help but pause. Episode 367, The Anticipated Meet. At the age of 13, Michael had learned antique restoration for a pottery horse of his father's. But after he turned 14 years old, he seemed nonchalant about the other two incomplete antiques Joshua owned. His behavior became more and more nomadic, and he never stayed in Evanston for long. Forget about Evanston. He didn't even return much to the Clark family home. He did everything once and then moved on to something else. If he hadn't been like that, Rosemary wouldn't have been so worried about him. If Bessy hadn't come to Evanston, Rosemary wasn't sure how long he would have stayed in Evanston.
Can I see the antique horse?
The manager looked at Joshua. Smiling, Joshua waved his hands.
Of course.
On the other side of the estate, Bessy was sitting on the bench in the corridor with her cloak, waiting for Michael to get the keys. Michael hadn't driven his own car today, and Marvin was staying in the Clark family's house for a while longer. However, Michael had many cars and was getting a new key from the yard. Bessy sat sideways with her legs casually crossed. She looked down and unhurriedly sent a message to Giant Crocodile. She asked why he had sent such a rare mechanical box without telling her in advance. She was strong and didn't know how rare it was, and the almost extinct mechanical box had been broken by her. Giant Crocodile was speechless. Finally, he replied,
It's ceremonial. Brother, it's okay. I was afraid you would be impatient, so I specifically didn't tell you. If you don't like it, I can send you another next time.
Bessy stared at the words, "It's ceremonial," for a long time. She closed the chat page. Then she violently played a new game on her phone, one she hadn't even sent to Tucker yet. Her technique was much more rough than usual. Michael shook the car keys in his hands as he stood beside her, watching.
Bessy, your temper has gone up today.
Bessy's face was casual, but her hands playing the game weren't soft, and she remained silent. Sitting down and leaning against her, Michael wrapped his hands around her waist and rested his chin on her shoulders. He hooked her waist from one side with his hand and softly whispered, "Continue playing. I'll watch." Bessy poked the phone and unhurriedly sent a screen recording to Tucker. The next day was Monday. At noon, Bessy had an appointment with Kara and the others. She connected the computer to the printer in the laboratory, printed the 2 documents in the file tray, bound the 2 documents, and stuffed them into her black backpack. She checked the document on the screen, thought for a moment, and clicked to reprint it. Instead of putting those documents into her bag, she went to the restroom, her backpack in one hand and the documents in her other. She always walked very quietly. Elijah came to the lounge to get a cup of water and smiled at her.
"Hello, Bessy."
Taking off her protective clothing and slowly putting on her cloak, Bessy greeted him as well. When Elijah took the cup and was about to head out, he heard her fresh, female voice call, "Elijah, wait."
"What's the matter?"
He stopped and turned around to smile at her. Having put on her coat, Bessy handed the last printed document on the table to Elijah and casually said, "This is a copy of the spacecraft data I compiled at noon last week. Take a look. It might be helpful for your research."
"You..."
Elijah stood at the door staring at the documents in a daze. He thought that she must have taken Mr. Rostron's words in the morning to heart. Mr. Rostron had said she would seriously be of help to their research. Elijah knew that she went to the library at noon every day. He hadn't expected her to have sorted out the information in one afternoon. "It's nothing too important." Buttoning her jacket and picking up her black backpack with one hand, she looked at Elijah with a lazy smile.
I didn't have much time to organize them for you. I hope you don't mind. I hope it'll be useful to you." Having been to the laboratory for a short while, she remembered the various times Elijah spoke up for her. She took her backpack and started to leave. She took 2 steps and then lightly said, "Don't worry, I already have a teacher." Behind her, Elijah stood there for a long while before opening the document. He thought that Bessy's random sorting was really random, but when he opened it, unexpectedly, everything was targeted and clear. When Mr. Rostron said she could help the team, Elijah had been a little skeptical. Only after seeing this plan did he understand Mr. Rostron's meaning. Bessy's computer science skills were at full level, and this city's competition was about aerospace propulsion. For her, it wasn't particularly challenging, especially since her brain was already sensitive to this subject and she also had very strong hands-on skills. Although she had only spent one afternoon on it, she had already drawn out a plan. Elijah stood at the door for a long time. Having been in the laboratory for so long, he had witnessed lots of open fights and covert maneuvers. He had always seen through things clearly, but looking at the planning book now, he couldn't help but feel ashamed. "Elijah?" When Sarah came over to change her clothes for lunch, she noticed him standing there without moving. Elijah put away the documents and turned around. He didn't show the documents to her. He turned to the side and gave way for her without saying anything. While working on the project on the weekends, things had already been a little awkward. At this moment, seeing Elijah's expression, Sarah couldn't suppress her thoughts anymore. After making sure that Mr. Rostron wasn't nearby, she lowered her voice and sneered. "Elijah, I already told you last time. Do you really not know, or are you pretending not to? Mr. Rostron obviously wants to pave the way for Bessy, and even wants to accept her as a student." She couldn't help but feel anxious at the thought of Bessy participating in the research and having her name included. She has only been to the laboratory for a few days and is on equal footing with us, who in the laboratory didn't advance step by step. She pursed her lips. "You?" Elijah's expression didn't change. He flicked away Sarah's hand and his grip on the documents tightened. He then directly opened the door and left. He didn't tell Sarah that Bessy already had a teacher, let alone show her the plan. Sarah. She had no idea what she had just missed out on. Kara and the others had arrived in the cafeteria a while ago and had already ordered their food by the time Bessy arrived. "Bessy, you came just in time. I've studied a bunch of computer science books." Kara patted her school bag. Sitting down on the iron chair, Bessy glanced at Kara's bag, then put her backpack on the table. She unzipped it and took out 2 printed documents from inside. "Take a look at this first." Bessy handed the document to Gary. Gary opened it and saw that it was a plan for a project called Industrial Machinery. He smiled. "I just happened to read a lot of books on this on Sunday." Leaning on the back of the chair, Bessy poked her straw into the Coke can, propped her chin up, and took a sip before saying, "Industrial Machinery is a backup plan I prepared for you, because I'm not sure if you'll want to continue doing my project after hearing my actual plan." Kara and Kai immediately put away their smiles and turned serious. Gary pursed his lips and solemnly said, "Go on." "Because it might involve radiation." Bessy pursed her lips. "That's it?" Kara heaved a sigh of relief with Kai. "I was scared to death. I thought you were going to do some kind of murder or arson. This is a small thing." The 3 of them waved their hands, and Kara turned to Bessy, her face full of anticipation. "Then, what are we going to study about radiation?" Their attitudes were beyond Bessy's expectations. She was speechless. Glancing at Kara, she silently pushed another document over. Seeing that Bessy didn't speak, Kara picked up the document she had laid on the table. "What kind of competition is it that you're so mysterious?" Halfway through speaking, her voice suddenly got stuck in her throat. Opposite her, Kai was busy eating, but when he heard her stop, he looked up and asked, "What's wrong?" He pulled the project document over to him and indifferently said while still eating, "What did you see?" He stopped mid-sentence, too. After a long while, he looked up at Bessy, sitting diagonally across from him. Bessy, I'm not mistaken, right? This is the ICNE competition?" The last time they met, Kara had explained what the ICNE competition was, so Kai and Gary remembered very clearly that it was a high-level science competition in the academic world.
Next to him, Gary glanced at the planning project and turned to Bessy.
You formed a team with us for May of next year?
They already knew that Bessy was going to participate in the ICNE preliminary competition in May of next year, but they hadn't expected she would take them with her for this project.
No, Gary, look closer.
Kara finally returned to her senses. She stiffly took a sip of her Coke and said,
You missed the second line.
Kai slammed the project document down in front of Gary. Gary lowered his head. On the first page, the bold words on the second line read, ICNE Finals. Gary's fork dropped onto the table. He'd always been so calm and composed, but at this time, his face couldn't help but stiffen.
So you're going to participate in the finals in February next year?
It was fine if she, a new student, wanted to go to the ICNE finals that were made for top research students. But she wanted to drag them along with her? Casually putting down her Coke and picking up her fork, Bessy nodded.
Yeah.
How did you get the spot?
Gary glanced at the documents again. Pausing, Bessy took a bite of her meal, lowered her head and vaguely said, Just say if you want to join. The three of them exchanged glances. Since Bessy had come to them, it meant she was serious about this. Although, the ICNE final was indeed a little outrageous for them. Count me in. Kara patted the table. Episode 368. The four of you are in a team? Gary also nodded, regaining his composure.
I'm not sure how much I can help you, but I'll try my best.
Kai silently raised his hand.
Bessy, are you sure you want to bring me along?
Then it's settled. Bessy crossed her legs, resting one hand on the table and holding her fork in the other. I've already submitted the list. I'll take you guys to Dean Soup to take leave of your afternoon classes. To engage in this research, they had to drop their courses. At 3:30 p.m., Bessy came out of the library with a book and met the other three to take them to see Dean Soup. Dean Soup had received her message in the afternoon and was already waiting in the office.
The four of you are in a team?
Dean Soup looked at the four teammates in front of him. After thinking for a few minutes, he gave the other three a notice of leave.
If you have this opportunity, it's best to grab it. The highest score Northwestern University has gotten is 42, and the University of Chicago has scored about the same. Bessy, it'll be best if you can surpass 42 points, enter the top 30, and break the historical record of the two schools.
He finished speaking and approved their leaves. After they left, he turned to his assistant and finally said,
Am I asking too much of Bessy and the others? This is the ICNE, an international research project. Not a random experimental one.
This innovative type of research project required the creation of novel things. There were 100 teams in the world, including doctoral students who had participated 2 or 3 times already. Forget getting into the top 30. Even getting a middle-tier result was not to be underestimated. The global rankings of Northwestern University and the University of Chicago were consistently in the top 50 to 60. Obtaining the top 30 in this kind of competition was also an important indicator of school rankings over the years. Dean Soup suspected he might be dreaming. Downstairs, Kara silently stared at her. Bessy, you're not human. Kai also glanced at Bessy and nodded in silent agreement. Holding the book with her other hand, Bessy turned and raised an eyebrow. Huh? I mean, when you said, would you join the competition in February next year, I thought that Dean Soup only wanted to broaden your horizons, not expect you to get a good ranking. Kara had obviously done some homework on ICNE after lunch, but the top 30? Bessy, I'll try my best not to drag you down. In the hearts of people like Kara, Bessy's direct entrance to the final round in February was already law-defying enough. But to aim for the top 30, it was obvious how high Dean Soup's expectations were of her, and how strongly he believed in her abilities. He still had such a high level of confidence despite the 3 newcomers on her team. Kara really felt like no one was crazier than Bessy. The other 2 also silently stared at her. Bessy had only focused on the research items and never checked the history of the competition before. She paused and then just said, "All right." They parted ways at the intersection. Kara and the other 2 wanted to go back to talk to the assistant director to clarify their doubts.
Why do I feel like Bessy doesn't seem nervous about getting into the top 30?
Kai paused. Kara laughed. How could that be? She's probably nervous just like us. I saw that she has bloodshot eyes, so she must not have slept well these days. Entering the top 30 is too much pressure. But if we could reach it, I'd be willing to give up 10 years of my life. Gary stared at Bessy's back without speaking. Naturally, they didn't know that Bessy was indeed under big pressure. But it wasn't because of Dean Soup. Dean Soup hoped she would be in the top 30, but Bessy and Principal White had their own plans. In March, Principal White would hold a successor ceremony for the academy. In this ICNE competition, he had directly asked her to work towards the top 3. In comparison, Dean Soup's request for the top 30 was really not that much pressure on her. James parked at the Park Place Apartments and got out of the car, carrying his groceries in one hand and talking to Bessy on the phone with the other. He said,
Bessy, when will you and Michael come back for dinner? The teacher your uncle hired for Tucker arrived yesterday and lives across from us. Come over for dinner. Jack said that the teacher is very impressive.
On the other end of the line, Bessy walked to the lounge and replied,
This Saturday, then.
She also wanted to see what kind of teacher Zeke had found for Tucker. Although she had asked Tucker to ask Mr. Cheatham, he was too busy with his project. He couldn't teach Tucker. He could only point him in the general direction. They hung up. James crossed the road and was about to head towards the gate when a car stopped in front of him. He took a step back and vigilantly looked forward. The back door opened and a beautiful woman in a light yellow coat came out. As soon as she raised her head, James immediately recognized Anne. Dad, long time no see. Standing by the car door, she looked up at James and smiled. James turned and was about to leave, but Anne stopped him. My uncle asked me to tell you. He wants to invite you and Tucker to dinner. She was naturally talking about the fourth son. Jack had never mentioned the Miller family's matters to James, but he had heard of the fourth son before and ran away even faster at this moment. He would go back and ask Jack about this. Behind him, Anne stared at his back, rooted to the ground. Then she turned and got into the car again, driving towards Grace's small apartment. When she got there, Grace was on the phone with a relative from her hometown.
You said you saw Bessy on TV? Yes, that was Bessy. I didn't know she turned out to be the niece of a big celebrity. Yes, she's in Evanston now.
Anne was in the arts department and her schedule was a lot freer than Bessy's. Listening to Grace's call, she slammed the door shut. In the past 2 weeks, almost every day, someone called Grace to inquire about Bessy. Not many youngsters lived in Fairfield, but they watched TV and recognized Bessy's impressionable face. They spread the word, and now everyone knew that Fairfield's pride and joy had appeared on TV. The same was true of people they knew from Chicago. Just like Elise, Grace's sisters, whom she had never interacted with much before, were now rushing to call her. Everyone only focused on her eldest daughter and seemed to have forgotten about the existence of Anne. Sitting in front of her computer, Anne pursed her lips and stared at her small Twitter page. Bessy already had a Twitter hot search corner called BM. Everyone followed her Twitter, but she still didn't post anything. Even after just 2 weeks, her popularity was enough to be considered a small celebrity. Looking at the super chat area, Anne sneered. Using the tone of a fan, she posted a tweet under a secret account. Seeing that everyone wants to know this girl's violin skills, I have a video of her competition here. She posted a video link. The competition video had been widely promoted on Twitter at first, and some people even fell in love with her because of her face. Later, after the plagiarism incident with Anne, her violin video was deleted for some reason. However, Anne still had a copy on her phone. She watched her Twitter post rise in views and popularity, feeling an unbridled sense of jealousy in her heart. She sneered. It was better the more popularity it received. That way, when the truth was revealed, Bessy would fall even harder. Anne had realized a few months ago that the previously viral video of Bessy's performance had been deliberately deleted by someone afterward. At that time, she had fallen into a state of despair and failure from being kicked out of the Violin Association. But in retrospect, everything seemed strange.
How old was Bessy 4 years ago? Whenever Grace called the teacher, he said she would skip class at will and sometimes skipped a whole week of classes. Bertha never stopped her, and Bessy had said she didn't want to learn the violin from Mr. White and had taken many years off. Anne simply didn't believe that under such a lack of practice and guidance, she could write such a tune. She stared at her Twitter post that had reached almost 1 million views. Nobody had realized it before it was deleted previously, but now that her video had been published, some of Noah's fans certainly heard the similarity between his song and Bessy's tune. Only a composer could understand the disgust of being plagiarized, especially since Bessy and Noah knew each other. The repercussions of finding out your friend had plagiarized you were much more severe. And even Zeke would feel disgusted by Bessy. Anne knew that the production shows had scripts. Unlike the netizens who believed that Bessy had invited Noah, she believed that Zeke and the production crew had invited him. But based on this setup, Noah and Bessy were already seen as friends by the internet. If it was exposed that she had plagiarized her friend's song, staring at the tweet, she waited a long time before closing the page. At the same time, Jack and Ricky came into the Park Place apartments with grave expressions.
Jack,
James heard them come in and came out of the kitchen carrying a pot.
Can I ask you about my fourth brother? What kind of person is he? The fourth son? Gabriel?
Speaking his name, Jack instantly regained his senses. He turned to James with a stern expression.
Have his men found you?
James shook his head and hesitated slightly.
No, he has found my youngest daughter. Is it dangerous?
Upon hearing this, Jack heaved a sigh of relief and sat down on the sofa. Having checked Anne's information, he wasn't very concerned about her.
Gabriel is vicious and unrelenting. James, tell your second daughter to keep her distance from him. It won't do her any good.
He frowned. Holding his pot, James seemed deep in thought. While they were talking, Tucker arrived with a man in spectacles. The man had a pair of brown eyes and looked about 27 or 28 years old. His brown hair was slightly long, and he wore a pair of golden glasses on the bridge of his nose. His expression was rather bright. Episode 369. Bessy's Violin Video.
Mr. Rand.
Jack stood up and very respectfully greeted him. Troy immediately waved his hands.
Please don't be so courteous. I'm indebted to Mr. Miller.
They sat down and Jack turned to Troy.
I heard from Zeke that you're hoping to enter the World Poker Tour headquarters as well.
Yes, because my idol is in the World Poker Tour, said Troy as he sat down on the sofa. He wasn't reserved at all, and his eyes lit up at the mention of this.
I hope I can enter the World Poker Tour headquarters technical department and participate in their core activities.
James returned to the kitchen. Everyone present, including James and Ricky, were well versed in this profession, especially Ricky. He knew that this Mr. Rand was rather impressive and was even from Austria. At this time, he even had aspirations to join the World Poker Tour for someone. Ricky didn't know much about the World Poker Tour's insiders, but he had heard of the person with the most famous reputation.
By the way,
said James as he poked his head out while holding the pot.
My daughter is coming over this Saturday. Mr. Rand, do you have time to eat with us on Saturday afternoon? Of course, it'll be an honor.
Mr. Rand laughed. Upon hearing this, James was even more encouraged. Soon, the meal was ready and they all ate well. After washing the dishes and cleaning up the kitchen, James took his phone to his room and closed the door. He stared at Grace's phone number for a long while before finally unblocking it and calling her. On the other side of town, Grace was eating with Anne.
Why did you call me?
She pursed her lips. Anne looked up at her. Grace mouthed,
It's your dad. Anne came to find me today.
James sounded fuzzy because he had drunk wine, and his voice was rather loud.
She's my daughter as well. Although we have no mutual affection, I don't want to see her jump into a fire pit. Tell her not to talk to her Uncle Gabriel. He's not a good person.
Holding the phone, Grace turned to Anne.
Anne, who's Gabriel? Your dad's telling you not to.
Anne had already heard what James said. Her hands tightened around her fork and she directly reached out to snatch Grace's phone away. Why can't I talk to him? He is my uncle after all. Why can't I return to the Miller family? I'm part of the Miller family as well. You let Bessy and Tucker return, so why can't I? You don't want me to be accepted into the family, and you're even stopping Uncle Gabriel from doing so? Without waiting for James's response, she hung up. Grace stared at her in shock.
Anne, how could you speak to him like that?
Both of them were smart and had relied on both Bessy and James's reputation to survive these few months. But Grace never expected Anne to harbor such resentment towards her father. Slamming the phone down, Anne picked up her fork, paused for a while, and then looked at Grace lightly. You and my aunt have been deceived by him. The fourth son is the true person with authority in the Miller family. As for Tucker and the others, they're only struggling without any real power. Otherwise, why do you think they're still staying in that little community? Because the fourth son refuses to acknowledge them, so they can't stay in the old courtyard. You're still dreaming of being brought to a prestigious family by them? Mom, dream on. Grace was unaware of this and stared at Anne in shock.
You're speaking the truth?
Of course. He invited us to the old courtyard to eat tomorrow. You'll know when you see it. Anne took a deep breath and regained her composure. She looked away and sneered. Furthermore, he and my dad are on opposite sides. Based on my observations, my uncle is about to make his move. Mom, I advise you to stop doing things that rely on Dad and Bessy's reputation. My sister's glory is about to come to an end. Dad thinks he's hiding well in the little community, but he has no idea. Everything is under my uncle's control.
What do you mean?
Grace silently looked at her. Putting down her fork, Anne glanced at her. Do you know why I'm standing on my uncle's side? Because he has long linked hands with the Flake family, who probably have an intelligence network. Dad's side is arrogant, but isn't useful. Otherwise, she wouldn't dare make a move against Bessy. Zeke, James, and the others would have their own skin to save. They would be in a predicament. When Bessy returned from the laboratory at 9 p.m., Marvin and Patrick were sitting at the dining table, waiting for her and Michael before they ate. Sitting in her seat, Bessy scrolled through her phone while eating and saw a message from Mary. Bessy, you're on the hot search again. Bessy slowly sent a question mark. Mary replied to her very quickly. The video of your violin performance. It seems a fan just posted it, and it's going viral. I didn't expect your violin to be so impressive. Mary sent a screenshot of the hot search. Zeke Miller's niece's violin. Original song. She sent a whole bunch of headlines. Bessy didn't say much after seeing these and only told Mary to study well. She had finished eating and returned to her room to prepare for the competition. Her heart was fixated on the experiment, so she naturally didn't know that on Twitter, her hot search post had slowly risen from the top 10 to number 1. Her violin performance at the Violin Association had reached level 7 standard and very easily attracted people's attention. Because of 24-Hour Idol, she had attracted a lot of fans, so it was normal to reach first on the hot search. There were hundreds of posts about her. What the heck? I already said her violin was sure to be good. I'm crying. She actually didn't play the violin on 8-Hour Idol. Original song? It's actually an original song? I study music, so I'm also crying.
I'm a violin professor. I want to say I know this video. Back then, it went viral for a few days in the violin world, but then disappeared without a trace. I can finally see it resurface. I am a fan of this girl.
The violin video stayed on the hot search for a whole day. In the next morning, the BM profile was tagged in a tweet. Am I the only one who thinks her original song sounds a little familiar? The number of views on her profile had always been high. This particular post was quickly discovered by most netizens. Yes, you're the only one. Smiley face. No, you're not. This tweet didn't attract many people's attention at first. The netizens soon discovered the Evanston Violin Association, and a large number of people went to see their official blog. After reading Mr. Grint's page, they were all amazed.
I finally know why Mr. Sampson gave the advanced hint to Bessy without saying a word.
Same, I've already knelt down. In Austria, Zeke's manager also scrolled through BM's hot comments every day. She had many fans at Northwestern University. Almost every day, someone would take pictures of her going to the cafeteria. Today, the manager clicked on the trends as usual and immediately saw the popular violin video. When Zeke came back, the manager was sitting on the chair. He handed Zeke a thermos with one hand and his phone with the other, smiling.
Take a look. What is it?
Zeke drank from the thermos and flipped through Twitter. After clicking on the video and watching it, he also smiled, clicked on his own big account, and retweeted the video. The manager didn't restrict him from posting it and also retweeted it.
Your niece is very impressive. Of course.
Instead of exiting Twitter, he clicked on the video again, leaning back against the chair. He re-watched it with a big smile. Because Zeke had retweeted it, Bessy's violin video traffic reached its peak. Bessy was busy in the laboratory, as was usual at this time. Little did she know that there was another storm on the internet. Kara and the others weren't part of the laboratory and couldn't enter with her. They were in the building opened for them by President Soup, in the classroom where Bessy had previously done her experiments. They had lots of things to get familiar with in the early stages, and Bessy had asked them to extract a few elements to test the radiation. She was using special experimental equipment as a reactor in Mr. Rostron's laboratory. At noon, the four of them went to the cafeteria next to the laboratory. Bessy, you're famous now. Sitting by the window, Kara watched as Bessy was still recognized by the people passing her by, even though she wore her scarf and hat. She couldn't help but sigh. She reached out to show her the hot search. You've been in the top 3 hot searches since last night. The number 1 hot search had now changed from Bessy to Zeke forwards his niece's Twitter video. More netizens clicked on it because of Zeke. Casually holding her fork, Bessy pushed a document to Gary with her other hand. This is the result of the experiment I did this morning. Look at its diffraction wavelength later. While eating, Gary took the document.
Okay.
Although they were freshmen, under Bessy's guidance and Gary's seriousness, their project was progressing rather well. Kara only checked Twitter at noon. Seeing that they were still discussing the project, she touched her nose, closed Twitter, and joined the discussion with them. Naturally, they didn't know that at this time, new comments were appearing about the Twitter video. The popularity of Bessy's Twitter account had maximized, and many people were here to watch the show. Under Anne's deliberate manipulations, many fans of Noah also came in.
Wait, I also think this original song is a little familiar.
Speaking of which, any die-hard fans of Noah?
Hey, I know what you're talking about. Wait, let's talk privately.
Hearing Noah's early debut songs was rare, especially Return to Silence, which had never been included in an album nor been uploaded to major music apps. Only his earliest fans knew this song that Noah had insisted on recording. These early fans didn't know the reason behind it and only knew how different and special this song was, though he hadn't put it on his own album. Episode 370. Twitter Fiasco. With Bessy's increased traffic and the deliberate guidance of Anne, many people listened to her song a few more times and found something wrong. In the practice room in Northwestern University's art department, Anne put her violin aside, went to the bathroom, and clicked on Twitter. Driven by fake accounts she'd hired and a few diehard fans, a link to the song, Return to Silence, was posted. The story of the release of the track was posted by his early fan, Riverflow. The hot search on Twitter began to change again, and Noah's Return to Silence climbed up it. Closing the stall door, Anne stared at Twitter for a long time, then closed it and looked at her photo app. There was a photo of a musical score she had picked out for comparison. She had spent several days working on it, even more seriously than her fan had previously worked on the comparison between her and Bessy. Looking down and her eyelashes drooping slightly, she stood in the cubicle thinking for a long time. Instead of tweeting from her account to release the composition, she opened the comments and clicked on the Riverflow profile. Then, she sent her music scores through a private message. Riverflow was one of Noah's early fans. She was a huge fan and originally adored Bessy, but who knew that she would hear Noah's Return to Silence in Bessy's original song? She had originally suspected it was a coincidence. After all, Noah's fans still harbored a sort of gratitude towards Bessy. However, after seeing the professional music scores sent by Anne, the group of sensible fans directly exploded. This professional comparison of the music scores picked up all the plagiarized parts and proved that it was no coincidence. Despite the genre, the melody, and the arrangement, points of obvious imitation were prevalent. Riverflow commented, "Everyone, strictly control yourselves. Noah is friends with Zeke. He might try to save his face. What we have to do now is blow this matter up without involving him." The comparison music scores were circulated among Noah's fans, and they first attacked Zeke and Bessy. The hot search changed again. Plagiarism by Zeke's niece. Zeke's character setup collapsed. The tweet reposted by Zeke that morning became the target of all the netizens. "Zeke, did you know about your niece's plagiarism? I hope you can give us an explanation. Otherwise, we'll curse you forever." Zeke's fans defended him. "This matter has nothing to do with Zeke. I hope fans won't rise to." Noah's fans were very loyal, and a few people went to his Twitter to make trouble. Because no news came from Bessy's Twitter, they put all the pressure on Zeke's instead. In Austria, Zeke was still filming when his manager's phone started ringing frantically. He took it out and glanced at it while in the studio. After walking outside, he picked it up, feeling puzzled. "What's the emergency?" Since Zeke was filming in Austria, he didn't believe the staff would contact him unless there was an emergency.
"Is Zeke there? Something happened to his niece,"
the worker on the other end hurriedly said. Hearing that it was about Bessy, the manager's heart thumped fiercely. "Speak slowly. What's going on?" The staff member briefly explained the hot search. "Someone must be behind this. The plagiarism comparison chart came out too quickly, as if it was deliberate marketing. That person must have bought fake accounts. I can't control the comment sections." "I'll deal with this matter. Don't call Zeke first and don't let him find." Before the manager finished speaking, Zeke came out from behind him. "What can't I find out?" he asked. Because he was tall and had long legs, he was able to grab the phone out of the manager's hands. He clicked on his Twitter account. Even though the comments had been controlled by his team, his Twitter post was still overwhelmed by Noah's fans and fake accounts. The most popular comment had changed. "Zeke, why don't you delete the video and send a note to Noah to apologize?" Zeke casually glanced through it. He clicked on another tweet from a user called Redemption. "What the heck? Her own song is plagiarized, but she still forced Ann Miller to leave? Does she own the Evanston Violin Association? This is what her true character is, guys. Zeke not only didn't come out to apologize for his niece, he even retweeted the video from his account. Does he think we won't find out about the plagiarism? So arrogant. I wonder if Zeke feels like he just slapped himself in the face. His character setup has collapsed. I hope his niece returns to her senses." After understanding the matter, he sneered and looked at the manager. "Bring me my phone." The manager paused. Zeke stared at him with a calm expression. "Bring it." The manager quickly handed him his phone and said, "Don't mess around. I'll handle this matter. Don't make a statement." Without answering, Zeke left his phone and went back to filming. Staring at his back, the manager felt inexplicably uneasy. At the same time, those watching the show on Twitter noticed a new reply in the comments section under the post made by Redemption asking Zeke and Bessy to apologize. "I'm not deleting. Leave me alone." Looking down, the manager scrolled through his phone and saw Zeke's comment. He covered his eyes. "I knew it." He expected Zeke's interference to throw a bomb into the already explosive internet fray, and estimated that not long after, several discussions would pop up on Twitter. This matter would only become more serious. The next second, the studio called him again.
"Sir, what should we do?"
Zeke's public relations team always responded very quickly and had already discovered the discussions on Twitter. The public relations team had not yet acted, and after Zeke's message, netizens' emotions reached a new high. The manager thought about it. "Could you try to contact Noah's side first and understand the general situation? At least, we should try to temporarily protect Zeke's niece." While the netizens didn't know Bessy's personality, how could the manager not know after spending so much time with her and Zeke? No matter what, the manager didn't believe she would plagiarize. The new age of technology was like this. Bessy had shot too quickly to fame and previously seemed not to have any negative news. Now that people had finally found some, she once again became the talk of the town. The people who were jealous of her pounced on her at this time.
Noah, can we even contact him?
The staff member softly asked after a slight pause. Standing by the door, the cold wind blew against the manager, sending sharp gusts against his throat like knives. Thinking of Noah's respectfulness to Zeke during the show recording, he couldn't help but pause.
I think so. Just try it.
Upon hearing this, Zeke's team started trying to contact Noah's team to handle this matter. After discussing with the studio staff, the manager immediately walked back inside. While shooting the movie, Zeke's face was pale. He took his phone, entered a number, and thought for a long while before dialing it. The manager glanced over and saw that it was Bessy's number. She picked up. It was 7 p.m. and she was still in the laboratory. Twitter's plagiarism incident had only appeared 10 minutes ago. She took a document to the lounge as Zeke spoke.
Bessy, I heard that you're going to meet Tucker's teacher on Saturday.
Zeke didn't mention the incident online. His eyes were heavy, but his voice sounded normal. Putting the document sent by Kara and the others on the table, she concisely said, "Yeah." Zeke knew that Bessy wasn't the gossipy kind. He had been in contact with Tucker and knew Bessy was doing experiments. Hearing her tone now, he knew nobody had told her about the incident.
You're not home yet?
I've many problems to solve during the project's early stages. Bessy glanced at the project data, her eyebrows slightly furrowed, her dark eyelashes drooping. How do I suppress the fission reaction when preparing enriched uranium? Trailing off, she suddenly looked up, a light bulb flashing in her mind. I know, Uncle, I'll call you back. She hurriedly hung up. Putting his phone down, Zeke stared at the disconnected call screen and laughed.
She's still busy with the experiment.
Bessy is carrying on as usual. The manager also shook his head, holding a cigarette with a serious expression.
Someone must be controlling this matter, otherwise the comparison chart could never have been done in such a short time. But you're too impulsive. You don't know how many fans you'll lose with such a mindless impulse. Moreover, some big fans are leading the way and saying they'll stop being fans. Do you want to make an open statement?
A group of Zeke's fans was threatening to stop being fans.
No need. They can leave.
Zeke's voice was light and his eyes were cold. This incident blew up too suddenly. It was impossible that no one was behind it. The manager bit his cigarette.
But this original music by your niece is really strange. Return to Silence was written and composed by Nico himself. So strange. Wait, you said that Return to Silence is Nico's original song?
Zeke turned and stared at him. Although he had never met Noah previously, he of course knew about him and Nico. Noah had become famous partly because of his own talent, but the other half of his fame was because of Nico. In the past few years, the name Nico had remained a mystery in the industry. The manager knew at least 2 producers of famous domestic movies that wanted to invite Nico to arrange their movies' soundtracks. The manager wanted to contact the studio to inquire about Noah again. Zeke took out his phone and opened Twitter. Miss Lee hurriedly pressed on the doorbell at Ava's home in Evanston. Wearing her nightgown, Ava lazily opened the door. Miss Lee heaved a sigh of relief.
Thank God I came in time.
Miss Lee, Ava sat back on the sofa, took out her phone and gnawed on an apple. Look at Twitter first, she replied. On Twitter, Ava's account had also posted the video of Bessy in the Violin Association's competition, and she had even written, Bessy's violin is as good as ever. If Anne had Bessy's violin video, Ava naturally had it too. Thunder clapped in Miss Lee's mind, and she stiffly clicked on the comment section.
Did you know your friend plagiarized it?
You actually support her plagiarism?
I liked you quite a bit before, but today I'm totally unfollowing you.
Ava's previous Twitter post was an advertisement for interviewing guests on a live entertainment gossip show.
She's even going to an interview with an entertainment gossip show. Forget about that show. How could the interviewers accept a person like you with such misconduct?
Episode 371. Evanston Violin Association. Miss Lee finished reading these and helplessly glanced at her. You're too impulsive. Do you think you're Zeke Miller? Do you have the capacity to mess around? Even if he loses half of his fans,
His status in the entertainment industry is still unshakable. You only started out with a few loyal fans. Stay calm. Ava crossed her legs and took a bite of her apple. At the same time, the entertainment gossip show's blog was also besieged by a bunch of fans. Director, what are you going to do now? Netizens say that they'll never watch our show again. The show staff had called the producer overnight to talk about the Twitter incident. The producer fell silent for a while and then said,
"Send someone to contact Ava's side and tell her the agreement doesn't have to be renewed. Who's the guest in the next issue?"
The staff turned over the itinerary. Victoria Simpson.
"Contact Victoria in advance and ask her if she can take over the schedule tomorrow."
The producer flipped through Twitter. It would have been fine if Ava hadn't reposted the video, but she had. This matter had blown up too much. It not only impacted the program's reputation, but also Noah. Everyone in the entertainment industry knew that Noah's backing wasn't smaller than Zeke and might be even bigger. Dropping Ava meant that they wouldn't offend Noah and could even win a big wave of popularity and goodwill with the audience. The producer thought about it and hardly hesitated to make a decision. A few minutes later, the show deleted the tweet about having Ava as a guest. They then posted another one about Victoria instead. Not only did they cancel Ava and invite Victoria, but they also used the incident to brush up their reputation on Twitter. Miss Lee received a call from the staff while still in Ava's house. "Sorry, because of our program group, we might not be able to have Miss Hutchinson on the show tomorrow." They sounded polite, but everyone knew the reason behind it. "Okay, you lost the entertainment gossip show tomorrow." Miss Lee looked at Ava and sighed. "But the company hasn't called you yet to scold you for ruining the show's image. Soup Corporation is too tolerant of you." She scrolled her phone and saw that apart from the entertainment gossip show, Soup Corporation had no news. Only now did Ava's standing in the entertainment industry become clear to Miss Lee. After finding out that the gossip show had terminated their contract with Ava and deleted her mention on Twitter, the actors who usually got along well with her didn't so much as give her a call. On the contrary, although some people remained silent on Zeke's page, most of them gave him praise. A long Twitter post praised Zeke for maintaining his stance. His supporters included Katie. She acted like Zeke, retweeting an entertainment blogger's tweet that analyzed the psychological changes before and after Bessy's plagiarism incident. Isn't she desperate? At this time, Bessy was unaware of the big earthquake and the quiet changes in the entertainment industry because of her. At the same time, Simon hurriedly ran to Noah's recording studio and threw open the door. "Where's Noah? I called him 10,000 times and he didn't pick up." "Noah has been writing songs for 4 days and nights and only slept this afternoon. What are you doing, Simon?" Simon couldn't wait further and kicked the door open with a bang. The lounge door didn't have a security lock, and Simon also used 300% of his strength to kick the door open with one swift motion. Noah was devoted to music and basically couldn't sleep when inspiration came. He wouldn't stop until he finished writing the lyrics and music. Because of this, all his staff members knew his habit and would wait for him to rest and come out after finishing his music. Especially Simon, who took care of Noah in every possible way and treated him like his own son. He usually placed importance on Noah's rest more than anyone, so why was he kicking the door open shortly after Noah fell asleep? The staff who followed the manager had never seen him in such a state of panic. "Simon, what's the matter?" Simon didn't have time to answer. With the door opened, he walked to the bedroom at the back, which only had one bed. Simon had kicked the door so loudly that Noah would have heard it no matter how heavily he slept. He got up from his bed at this moment, with his head slightly lowered. Hearing them coming in, he slightly lifted his head, revealing his dark eye circles and messy doll hair. "What's the matter?" He leaned back and stared at Simon, his voice lazy and his spirits apparently weak. "You're still sleeping?" Simon hurriedly walked to him. "Look at your Twitter." "What's wrong with Twitter?" Noah searched beside his bed and couldn't see his phone. "I think my phone's outside." Simon blankly looked at him. "If you don't get on Twitter and do something, your arranger is going to be scolded to oblivion." Originally lazy, Noah suddenly paused at this. He looked up fiercely at Simon, his tired face instantly awakening. He quickly lifted his quilt and, without even putting on his coat, ran outside to find his phone.
The gentle and elegant boy who was originally dedicated to music suddenly reacted so fiercely the people standing behind Simon were shocked. But Simon, who had been extremely anxious, suddenly calmed down. He reached out to straighten his hair and clothes that had become messy from running. The others glanced at him and someone asked,
"Simon, what happened? Why were you so anxious?"
Simon turned his head and glanced at the person. He suddenly smiled as if he was in a good mood.
"I shouldn't be the one anxious now. It's in Noah's hands now. The entertainment industry is about to have a big earthquake."
Big earthquake? What kind of earthquake would happen? Simon was considered a top manager in the entertainment industry. It was certainly a big deal if he said so. The staff exchanged glances and suddenly thought of Twitter. They took out their phones. While talking, Simon's phone rang. It was an unknown number in the city. He walked outside and picked it up. On the other end of the phone was a person from Zeke's studio. Seeing that the phone call had been immediately picked up, he gestured to the studio people and politely said,
"Hello, may I ask if you're Simon Osborne, Noah Hyper's manager? I'm from Zeke Miller's staff and I wanted to explain about the Twitter post."
Upon hearing that it was Zeke's staff, Simon hurriedly said,
"Sorry, did we bring you trouble? Don't worry, I've already found Noah. This matter will be immediately resolved."
Simon spoke in an orderly manner and explained that Noah had already seen it. His tone was both quick and polite. He explained a little more and then hung up. In Zeke's studio, the person who contacted Simon had turned on the speakerphone, allowing everyone to clearly hear the call.
"Did I make the wrong call?"
The person holding the phone blankly looked up. Simon hadn't been as angry as he imagined and had been very kind, telling them not to worry. Furthermore, Noah was already solving the problem? It sounded so strange, but it was a good thing for Zeke's studio. After all, everyone in the entertainment industry knew Noah wasn't simple and was cleaner than Zeke in all aspects. No one had even picked out the person behind him. If that person wanted to fight, then forget Bessy. Even Zeke wouldn't be able to appease them.
"I'll call Zeke's manager to inform him of this."
The staff couldn't figure it out and didn't want to, so they just decided to tell the manager. In Austria, the manager picked up and was immediately relieved to hear this. He turned to Zeke and said,
"Noah's side said that it would be resolved. Your niece must have a very good relationship with Noah."
He believed her unconditionally? The manager looked at Zeke and fell into deep thought. In Evanston, Noah had already found the hot search on Twitter. The hot comment section had already been updated with new posts.
"The incident has already blown up. Noah, who had such a good relationship with Bessy on the show, did not say anything yet. What do you think this means?"
Everyone, please look at the pictures. After Bessy participated in the Evanston Violin Association assessment, plagiarism also broke out, and she slandered a young lady of the Evanston Association. I believe many people don't know about this because within a few days after the outbreak, all the videos and photos about Bessy on the internet had been cleanly deleted. I only managed to find a few pictures after looking for a technical specialist. Why were Bessy's photos and assessment videos deleted at that time? The netizens guessed that she had a guilty conscience and was afraid of being exposed for plagiarizing the great god Nico's composition. Why is Noah silent?
In the show, he seemed to have such a good relationship with Bessy, but he's not saying a single word at this time. He probably feels disgusted. After all, as a friend, she took his song to participate in a competition.
She committed plagiarism and has the face to drive others out of the Evanston Association because of this song?
Why is everyone only scolding her? I hope someone stands up and beats her.
After reading this, Noah silently went on his own account and posted a tweet.
She didn't plagiarize. This piece was originally composed by her.
After sending this, he put on his headphones to listen to Bessy's original violin song. Then, he returned to his studio, took out 2 pieces of paper from the file of manuscripts arranged according to the year, and sat thinking on the ground for a long time, his eyes slightly bloodshot.
"What's the matter?"
Simon walked over with his phone, pausing a little when he felt how strange Noah's mood was. Noah leaned back and covered his eyes.
"Do you know why Return to Silence never hit the charts and was never included in the album?"
Without waiting for his reply, he looked away and continued.
"Because she revised the song only once. The first time she sent it to me was on July 8th, 4 years ago.
It was exactly this song she played in the Evanston Violin Association. He handed a piece of music to his manager. Episode 372. Unfollow Zeke. 10 days later, I filled in the lyrics and she sent me the adapted version of the song, which is Return to Silence. Noah handed another original score to the manager. Simon wasn't clear about the relationship between Noah and Nico. He looked at the manuscripts in his hand, both of which had been copied by hand by Noah. Return to Silence is your first dark-style track, right? She sent it to me after adapting it without saying anything. Noah turned to the window. Music reveals things that can't be said. I guess that she must have experienced something then, because the adapted version that was Return to Silence felt like death. Noah turned back to him and stared at Simon with dark eyes. This song was written personally by Nico. At that point, Noah felt like Nico was different than before and had been reluctant to release this song, as if it was a sort of unspoken arrangement between them. Nodding, Simon sat down beside him. I really couldn't tell. How old was the great arranger at that time? 16? 15? He couldn't think of what dark thing she could have experienced at that age. Without saying anything, he closed Twitter and called Bessy. On the other end of the line, Bessy's voice was cold as ever. Go on. I watched your violin video from the Evanston Violin Association assessment. Congratulations, Noah softly said. Bessy paused for 2 or 3 seconds before leaning against the wall. Thanks. To be able to play her original song from 4 years ago in the exhibition was tantamount to letting go of her past. After Noah hung up, she stood in the corridor for a while, looking at her phone for a long time before smiling and returning to the laboratory. She was naturally unaware of other things that were happening. Outside the laboratory, Michael's car had arrived half an hour ago. Instead of getting out, he sat in the driver's seat with his eyebrows drooping. Looking down at a web page, it listed the credits for Return to Silence. Lyricist, Noah Hyber. Composer, Nico. Arrangement, Nico. Michael stared at the page for a long while. Someone knocked on the window. It was Patrick. He handed Michael a datasheet and said, Noah's past is very clean and I couldn't find anything, which is a little strange. I even asked Alexander to check it, but nothing was found. The person backing him should be Nico, but this Nico is even harder to find anything about than Noah. There's no trace of him at all. Having checked into so many people before with no trouble, Patrick thought this Nico person was a little scary. He seemed to be important. Turning on the lights, Michael flipped through the documents. Noah's background information was indeed incredibly clean. Michael had seen Case 712 in Fairfield and found Noah's clean background information second only to Scarlett. Patrick paused for a moment and continued. Michael, there's something strange about Noah. The data mentions his father, but there's no information on him. It's as if his father disappeared without a trace. It seems deliberately covered up. He trailed off. The information was just a few pages, basically showing the process of Noah's growth. Michael casually flipped through it, put the documents beside him and took out a cigarette, which he put in his mouth. There's nothing else. You can go back now. His voice was emotionless. Patrick returned to his car not far away, the engine of which was still running. Marvin in the driver's seat glanced at him. Did Michael tell you to do anything? What? Patrick was thinking of serious business and looked up at him confused. About the internet. Marvin took out his phone and opened Twitter to show Patrick. Didn't Michael tell you to do something about this? He said moodily. Michael doesn't need to move for this. Patrick looked away. Noah will settle it himself. Really? Putting down his phone, Marvin drove away from the school laboratory in disbelief. Does Noah seem that kind? Why would he help Miss Miller? Patrick scrolled through Twitter and scanned Noah's homepage. It's his way of repaying the person who concealed his information. If even Alexander couldn't find the information, it meant that whoever helped Noah cover up his information was more advanced than Alexander in hacking. This kind of person was rare in America and added to how Bessy had suddenly invited Noah to the variety show. Patrick thought about it and guessed that the person helping Noah could only be Bessy. Deep in thought, he saw Noah's latest post on Twitter and turned his phone to Marvin. Look, he's clarified it. In the female dormitory at Northwestern University, Anne had been scanning Twitter all night. The hot search on Twitter changed again, and the #1 post was, "Unfollow Zeke." Anne scrolled through Zeke's feed and saw that within half an hour, he had lost 300,000 fans and his follower count was continuing to drop. BM's Twitter followers had dropped the fastest, from 16 million to 14 million followers. Yes, make it a little bigger, Anne thought. Satisfied, Anne moved her laptop to her bed and pulled her curtains closed. She leaned her head against the bed in a comfortable position and continued scrolling. Halfway down the page, she refreshed it to read more of the wanton abuse from the Twitter users. Unexpectedly, as soon as she refreshed, she saw a clarifying comment. "The truth of the matter has already come out. I hope the netizens can apologize to Zeke and his niece." Several other comments followed suit and apologized. What was going on? Anne's expression twisted and she clicked on the comments and immediately saw Noah's post. There was no plagiarism. The piece was originally composed by her. No plagiarism? She originally composed that song? What did this mean? Anne couldn't believe this result. Return to Silence and Bessy's violin song had too many overlaps. How could it be her own composition? She clicked on the replies to his post. @Redemption, @River Flows. Come out and face your death. We've wronged her. I already said she wasn't this kind of person. Okay, Noah. I already apologized. After causing so much noise, the plagiarism incident was ultimately denied by Noah? Anne sat on her bed and couldn't help but scratch her head. During her scandal, the netizens had condemned her after finding the overlaps with Bessy's song. How come Noah could shake everything and turn the tides? She stared at this Twitter post and couldn't figure it out. Inexplicably irritated, she had already clicked on the red cross at the right side of the app, about to exit. Then, the fan account called River Flows sent her a private message again. "Miss, the song you pointed out, does it constitute plagiarism after professional appraisal?" This. Anne didn't immediately answer and just clicked on River Flows to see their feed. Most of their tweets were about songs of Noah's being on the charts, but scrolling further down, Anne found a few posts complimenting Nico. Her brain quickly turned, and she came to a realization. This person was a fan of Nico. It would be strange if they didn't join Noah's support group as a fan, but if they were a fan of Nico instead of Noah, then it would explain why they were the first ones to stand up after finding out about the plagiarism of Nico's song. They had even privately messaged her. Anne returned to the message. Any musical instructor could determine that this is plagiarism. River Flows paused for a long while and then thanked her. After closing the chat, Anne returned to her Twitter homepage again, her eyes flickering. In less than 10 minutes, a new trending topic appeared. Noah's biggest fan, River Flows, drops him. On Noah's side, instead of going back to sleep after posting to Twitter, he put on his coat while sitting on the ground and looked through the notations he had copied down. 20 minutes later, Simon knocked on the door and came in. Without raising his head, Noah asked, "Anything else?" "Yes, Twitter." Simon looked a little strange. Noah paused and looked up at him with bloodshot eyes. "Twitter still has problems? My fans probably wouldn't make a mess." He had faith in his fans. "Your fans are no problem, but..." Simon squatted down and silently glanced at him. "Have you forgotten your history? Most of your fans were fans of Nico first. Fans of only you are all right, but the Great Arranger's fans aren't." Everyone knew that Noah's history was closely tied to the extremely mysterious God-level composer Nico. Most of the teachers who taught music now used Nico's arrangements and compositions as a form of demonstration in class. Nico was unique in his musical interpretation and had garnered countless fans without the slightest publicity. Being able to reach this point in the music industry, Noah, a best-selling singer who wasn't underestimated by the older generation of artists, had much to thank the God-level composer for. Simon raised his phone and showed him a Twitter page. On the page was a thread of posts from River Flows. Everyone knows that Noah never participates in the entertainment industry, and it really wasn't easy for him to suddenly join 24-Hour Idol. He doesn't know anyone in the entertainment circle. I've checked Bessy's information. Before the third year of high school, she was from a completely impoverished town. How could she possibly know Noah? I've never seen her have any connection to Noah after coming to Evanston. So how could she suddenly invite him? There's only one reason. The sugar daddy behind her must be so big that even Noah had to give in. Screenshot of Noah's clarification post. At Noah, this song is composed and arranged by the great god Nico. How could you post a non-plagiarism statement in his place? Comparison of the two musical notations. Noah, I just want to ask you, what's the background of those people behind Bessy? Can't you see this evidence? At Noah, have you forgotten whose song made you become popular? Who made you? The background of the people behind Bessy might be too big, so I can't find any information about her on the internet. I don't know how long my Twitter post will last, but I hereby announce I'm dropping Noah. Other people were responding to and retweeting the post. Do you remember how any post regarding BM's Twitter suddenly disappeared overnight? It's frightening. I think we won't be able to see this after 2 minutes. In Noah's studio, standing to the side, Simon and the staff stared at Noah in silence, afraid to speak. Unexpectedly, there was no panic on Noah's face. Noah, why did the corners of his mouth twitch? Episode 373. Twitter has crashed.
What should we do now?
Simons looked at Noah.
Did you ask the great arranger already?
Instead of answering, Noah picked up his phone to call Bessy. Bessy was a little impatient this time. Go on. Sitting up straight, Noah concisely greeted her and then carefully asked,
Can I post something on Twitter?
He went on to explain what he meant. 2 minutes later, as the netizens were watching for the tweet from River Flow to be deleted, Noah's Twitter feed updated again.
Why? Probably because she's Nico.
It wasn't just Nico's fans who found the composer mysterious. Even Noah had found Nico mysterious at first. Nico had suddenly found him and wanted to arrange music for him. Noah didn't deny what River Flow had said. Half of his success in the music industry was due to Nico, the god-level composer that almost every singer wanted to collaborate with. Nico was not only a mysterious entity in the music industry, but also a big name that no one could ignore. Netizens referred to Nico as the genius ghost arranger and god-level arranger. Fans of Noah accounted for half the country, and many of them were also fans of Nico, who only wrote songs for Noah. Everyone knew that Nico only wrote exclusively for Noah. Fans thought of them as a pair. So what River Flow had written angered and disappointed Nico's countless fans. Just when the fans were about to follow the mob and go to Noah's account to unfollow him, they saw the tweet he had just posted. The fans were cast into a shocking frenzy. Everyone read the message with wide eyes several times before daring to believe the Twitter post. I feel like my eyes are dazzled. Someone come and wake me up. What's going on?
I'm pinching myself. Nico?
What the heck, Nico? Are you serious? Noah? The entertainment industry is going to explode. All the netizens watching the show knew that the origin of this incident was because of the overlapping points of Bessy's songs and Nico's composition. Nico and Noah had extraordinary popularity, so although Bessy was famous now and was Zeke's niece, they still became haters after thinking she copied Nico's song. She got even more hate than normal people would have. Even Zeke and Noah couldn't stem the tide of this hate, much less Katie and the others. After all, some people were already accusing Zeke and Noah of deliberately misrepresenting things. The incident shocked almost the entire entertainment industry. More people came out to stand up for Zeke, and half of the entertainment industry was waiting for the follow-up. They were thinking, I wonder how Noah and Zeke are going to wrap this up. But if Bessy was indeed Nico, then this incident wouldn't matter anymore. None of the netizens thought about all of this at the moment, though. Staring at Noah's Twitter, they only had one thought in their minds. The entertainment industry was going to explode. In Austria, Zeke's manager was waiting for the follow-up and kept checking his Twitter. While holding a small video conference with the studio people about the matter, he opened up his Twitter again, but it wouldn't load. He tried a few more times, but he still couldn't log on. His other applications were fine, and only Twitter was lagging. He couldn't help but turn to Zeke.
Can you check if your Twitter is working fine?
Looking down, Zeke took out his phone, scrolled through his apps, and clicked on Twitter.
It lagged on his phone as well, so he thoughtfully looked at the manager.
Has Twitter crashed?
At the same time, the other netizens also discovered the same problem. They realized they couldn't load Twitter all of a sudden.
It's that bad?
The manager deleted Twitter and then reinstalled it, but it was still lagging.
It's been busy a few times before, but only searching for hot trends was lagging and couldn't be refreshed. Since when has Twitter itself crashed entirely? What kind of news came out?
The manager asked his colleagues to give it a try. He confirmed that it had indeed crashed and turned to Zeke in shock. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was from the studio team, so he quickly picked it up and held the phone to his ear.
Twitter has crashed. What kind of news came out in America?
He asked. We just got a news update, but we don't know if it's reliable. The staff members seemed to have returned to their senses. It seems like Noah has just made a Twitter post.
Didn't he already release a clarifying post?
The manager had seen that post. No, the staff member paused for a long while and then said in a slightly vacant voice.
Noah posted another message saying that Zeke's niece is Nico.
Standing beside the manager, Zeke overheard the staff member's words. The Twitter programmers were working overtime tonight. 10 minutes later, Twitter returned to normal. Every netizen opened on it immediately and saw the refreshed hot trends. Nico. The number of searches was still rising. Because of Zeke, Noah, and Katie's participation in the incident so far tonight, many netizens were already paying close attention to this matter. And that was before Noah revealed the answer to one of the top 10 unsolved mysteries in the entertainment industry. Who was Nico? Previously, Simon had discussed with Noah that if the entertainment industry were to find out that Bessy was Nico, it would certainly explode. At the moment, not only had they revealed Nico's identity, but Zeke, Noah, and the others had contributed to raising the profile of this situation as well. It was too unrealistic to think that Twitter wouldn't completely blow up. However, even though the programmers had updated Twitter already, some netizens still couldn't load it. Everything turned blank as soon as they logged in. But Noah's tweet posted 20 minutes ago could be refreshed with a few more clicks. It was still there. Why? Probably because she's Nico. There were originally 490,000 replies, but when refreshed, they jumped to 500,000.
Zeke, your niece.
The manager stared at him.
She's Nico?
The genius ghost who had appeared out of nowhere in the entertainment industry 5 years ago. It was unbelievable that she was the final exam's top scorer and the creator of the God cards. But Nico, this person's status in the entertainment industry was comparable to Noah. Zeke looked much calmer than his manager, probably because he had already guessed this earlier. His hands weren't trembling as much as when he called Bessy. At this moment, Bessy was leaving the laboratory ahead of time, changing out of her radiology suit in the lounge. Originally, she had only written for Noah because he was a newcomer and his arrangements weren't strong, but it turned out their collaboration had lasted 5 years. During this period, many people had been watching things in Fairfield, so Bessy only secretly contacted Noah and never showed her face. Michael and Harvey had come to Chicago last year to encircle the bandits' den. When Noah asked to meet in Devil City, Bessy hadn't considered it, nor rejected it. Now, after seeing how Zeke, Katie, Ava, and the others had spoken up and stood up for her without knowing anything about her true identity, she realized that they really regarded her as a friend and as a relative. She had considered the impact of Noah's announcement on her and deemed it to be small. She was now devoted to research, but Zeke, Ava, Noah, and the others would be impacted greatly by this incident in the entertainment industry. Thus, she didn't refuse. After talking to Noah, she had already expected a wave of phone calls. At this time, she simply put aside her research and her documents into her backpack. As soon as she changed into her coat, Zeke called. Carrying her backpack on her shoulders, she picked it up and put her headphones on. Zeke stayed silent. She walked to the elevator and patiently waited for him to speak. Just as the elevator came down, Zeke finally seemed to find his thoughts.
Bessy, the tweet that Noah posted.
He was pretending to be calm, but a slight tremor could still be detected in Zeke's voice. It's me. Bessy entered the elevator and pressed the first floor button with clear eyes. Sorry, you must have been worried.
Zeke paused for a while and then replied,
"No, it's okay."
They exchanged a few more words. Then Zeke stiffly hung up. He glanced at the manager.
No wonder my niece was able to invite Noah.
Looking away, he turned back to his phone and blankly said,
How could Noah not accept Nico's invitation? When we were chatting, I heard Simon shouting about some great god. I even thought I heard wrongly.
The second of the top 10 unsolved mysteries in the entertainment industry, the mysterious participation of Noah in the variety show, was also resolved. Clicking on Bessy and Zeke's Twitter accounts, the manager saw that their followers had returned to normal, especially for Bessy, whose followers had originally fallen from 16 to 13 million. Right now, it was going frantically up again. If this continued, it wouldn't be shocking if she reached 20 million tomorrow. The manager continued to scroll through Twitter, his empty brain already recovering its sanity. He clicked on something and was about to ask Zeke to contact Bessy when he suddenly thought of something. He clutched his phone and stared at Zeke in a daze.
Zeke, do you remember in Hawaii, I told you about Noah having a backer?
Holding his phone, Zeke tilted his head. He pursed his lips and turned to the manager. His expression was startled. The manager repeated what he had said at the time.
Simon said that Nico is a member of the World Poker Tour.
While recording 24-Hour Idol in Hawaii, Zeke's manager had discussed Nico with Simon. That was how he knew that Nico was a member of the World Poker Tour. When the manager learned this, he had even exclaimed that it was no wonder Noah's journey was so smooth in the entertainment industry. No one ever dared to force him to sign any weird agreements. And his road to stardom must have been much more magnanimous than Zeke's. Other managers might not remember, but regarding Noah's mysterious backing and the involvement of Nico, the great arranger who moved in and out of places with wizardly elusiveness, the manager remembered everything. Even Simon's expression at the time. But now, if Bessy was Nico, then didn't that mean she was a member of the World Poker Tour? Episode 374. See Miss Miller. The manager stared at Zeke. As his manager, he had followed him for so many years and experienced so many storms, and could remain calm even in the face of the Miller family's fourth son. However, ever since Zeke had brought Bessy back into the family a few months ago, he felt like his bottom line had been repeatedly challenged. Forget about being the final exam's top scorer and one of the best poker tournament players.
Zeke, what's going on with the World Poker Tour?
The manager stared at him, his legs going soft.
Who on earth is your niece? She even has the World Poker Tour as her backing. I remember she seemed to be good at programming.
He suddenly felt like before he met Bessy, his unrealistic conjecture about her then was simply too ridiculous. He even thought she was trying to cozy up to someone powerful. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but cover his face. The World Poker Tour, an American tycoon-level company, could also get involved in matters of the entertainment industry. He felt like Nico was definitely a management-level figure in the World Poker Tour.
Do you think she's from the IT department of the World Poker Tour?
He tightened his grip on the phone. The more he thought about it, the more certain he was. His mind slowly turned as he said,
Last time, I seemed to hear Jack mentioning the IT elite department of the World Poker Tour. Everyone is a wizard there. I wonder if your niece is on the inside. When I see Jack next, I'll definitely ask him more questions.
Zeke's long eyelashes slightly trembled, and he lowered them. He had naturally thought of this as well. Not far away, the director called Zeke. His expression was no different than usual. How was he so calm? Taking a sip of the cold mineral water in his hand, the manager stared at Zeke's back. The charming Zeke was stiffly walking back. Having always thought he was exceptionally calm, the manager was now speechless. He watched him for a while and then couldn't hold himself back from opening his Twitter. Twitter's tune changed very quickly. Because of Bessy being Nico, Zeke, who was already so popular, reached a new high in his traffic. His fans successfully broke the 100 million mentions mark. The entertainment industry was destined to explode that night. Some were happy, while some were sad. Miss Lee was still at Ava's home in Evanston, very concerned about Bessy's movements on the internet. She was the first to know that the Nico incident had broken out. At this time, she was sitting on the sofa with her mobile phone, looking dumbfounded. "Miss Lee?" Ava poured 2 glasses of lemonade and put one in front of her. "Why do you look like that?" She raised an eyebrow. Miss Lee suddenly remembered the original violin song on Ava's homepage. According to Ava, Bessy had adapted it for her. Many musicians and TV arrangers had liked her song, and some even offered her $50,000 for it. Katie had even asked to see Ava personally. This wasn't a question of money, but the relationship between the director and Katie. At that time, Miss Lee couldn't understand why Ava didn't agree to sell the copyright. "Do you know why Noah didn't let you sell the copyright of your violin song?" Miss Lee grabbed her hand. The lemonade Ava was holding almost spilled out. She shrugged her off and looked up at her, drinking water and calmly asking, "Why?" "Because the adaptation and arrangement of your violin song were done by Nico," said Miss Lee. "It was Bessy's arrangement. How could it be Nico?" Ava answered without even thinking about it. About 2 minutes later, the realization sunk in and she looked up at Miss Lee. "Wait, who are you talking about?" "Nico," Miss Lee repeated. Ava spit out the sip of lemonade she had just taken. The producer of Entertainment Gossip had asked the production to withdraw the contract with Ava and replace her with Victoria. After another wave of messages, he put away his phone and went to take a shower. After his shower, he saw his phone frantically buzzing on the table. Drying his hair with a towel, he strolled over and was shocked to see that it was a call from his boss. He immediately picked it up and, before he even said a word, was quickly scolded.
"Who told you to remove Ava without authorization? Don't you know about Nico's popularity? Now all the netizens are scolding our production team, and we've even offended Ava. Apologize to her. If she doesn't go live tomorrow, you won't need to come into work ever again."
After speaking, he hung up without giving the producer a chance to answer. Scared to death, he threw aside his towel and, before calling his staff members, quickly checked Twitter. There was a headline circulating, "Entertainment industry's genius ghost arranger Nico's mysterious identity revealed." He was immediately stunned and he clicked to read it. Bessy was unaware of the carnage happening online. She had received several calls from Mary and the others when she walked out of the elevator. Ignoring them, she quickly noticed the car parked on the side of the road. The lights in the car were dimmed, and a clear, handsome figure could be seen in front of the seat by way of the dim yellow streetlights. Bessy paused. She hadn't informed Michael that she was leaving early today and had been prepared for the 20-minute walk home. Walking over to the driver's seat, she put one hand on the window and knocked on the door with her other hand. In the driver's seat, Michael was leaning back in the seat, deep in thought. He sat up when he saw her and reached over to open the door of the passenger seat, raising his sharp eyebrows slightly. His voice sounded calm.
"You're a little earlier today."
Bessy got into the car. "Why did you come so early?" She put on her seatbelt. Driving the car onto the main road, Michael almost seemed to sigh when he heard her question. He tapped the steering wheel with his white fingertips and said,
"I came to sit in the front row to watch the great god Nico's identity revealed."
"I can explain." Bessy leaned against the window and was silent for a while before looking up at the roof of the car.
"Exclusive god-level arranger."
Michael glanced at her again without any hurry. Bessy was speechless. She gave up struggling to explain. She took out her phone and saw 99+ messages on her social media accounts. Silently lowering her head, she flipped through her messages. Most of them were from her classmates, which she replied to one by one. However, Kara and the others were still in the laboratory and didn't bother her at this time. The two returned to the Highline apartments. The chef had already laid out the dishes. Both Marvin and Patrick had already eaten. Usually only Marvin was there, but today they were both sitting on the sofa, waiting for them to return. They glanced at Bessy from time to time. Marvin was playing games on his phone. Patrick couldn't help but shift his gaze from Bessy to Marvin. When his character died again, Marvin glanced up at Patrick's stare and couldn't help but shrink back.
"Brother, why are you looking at me?" "I'm trying to figure out why you're so calm."
Patrick had also paid attention to the incident online and naturally knew about Nico. He had just said that Nico wasn't a simple character a second ago,
But the next second, it was revealed that the composer was actually Bessy.
"Oh, you're talking about Miss Miller's arrangement?"
Marvin looked away from Patrick and went back to playing his game, his tone still calm.
"What's there to be curious about? You don't seem to know many things."
Marvin knew a lot about Austria, and it wasn't the first time he saw Bessy's connections with the World Poker Tour. Although he was dull, he knew that Bessy must at least be an influential figure of the World Poker Tour with some connections. Forget about being Nico. Even if it was revealed that she was an intermediate member of 129, he would only feel slightly surprised. Having been looked down upon by Marvin, Patrick was now speechless. Compared to everyone else, the one having the most difficult time was Anne. She shrank under the covers, her cell phone still on Noah's Twitter homepage. Noah's post had already reached 1.25 million comments. Her mind went completely blank as she read them. She harshly bit her lip with her teeth and suddenly remembered how back in high school, rumors had spread that Bessy had given Mary a box of out-of-print Noah albums. At the time, Anne only thought that Bessy had obtained pirated CDs and hadn't been bothered about it. But now that she thought about it, the signs had been everywhere. It turned out, Bessy was Nico? Implying that Bessy plagiarized Nico was simply the world's biggest joke. For a few years, Nico had been a monument in entertainment circles, marking an era in the music industry. Anne would have never thought of connecting Bessy with Nico, since the age gap seemed too great. Staring at Twitter as the number of comments rose to 1.3 million, she was still in a daze when her phone suddenly rang. It was a phone call from the fourth son's subordinate. With trembling hands, she quickly answered. The fourth son's subordinate simply asked if she could contact Bessy. The fourth son wanted to meet Bessy and even promised Anne a lot of benefits. In a daze, she hung up. She finally realized what was meant by the expression shooting yourself in the foot. She had only wanted to ruin Bessy, but who could have known that, in the end, instead of ruining her, she would help guide her to a smooth journey once again. Returning to BM's Twitter, she saw that her fans had already increased to 19 million. Bessy was a hit when she appeared on 24-Hour Idol. Now, the Nico incident has swept the entire entertainment industry. Even Elijah, who didn't concern himself with such gossip usually, knew about it. In the laboratory, Elijah couldn't help but exclaim when Bessy handed some data to him.
"Bessy, you're too impressive."
Bessy just looked up at him. Putting down the scissors, Mr. Rostron also looked at him. Elijah thought for a while and seriously said,
"Mr. Rostron, you might not know, but this student is not only good in school, but she's also a god-level composer. She has 23 million fans on Twitter. Her status in the music industry is probably akin to yours in the Research Institute."
Episode 375. Bessy Comes with a Halo. Sarah pursed her lips and silently took away the experimental equipment without saying anything. Mr. Rostron wasn't usually concerned with these things, but upon hearing that, he couldn't help but glance at Bessy in surprise. People in the Research Institute were focused on research. Like Mr. Rostron, when they participated in research, they were basically living in their lab for 2 to 3 months, working with various data in a headspace that ordinary people couldn't imagine. Forget about Twitter. Even their contact with family was limited. Used to this kind of life, most people from the Research Institute who really focused on research didn't pay attention to things in the entertainment industry and only occasionally watched TV. They even felt like sleeping was a waste of time and devoted their whole life to the laboratory and doing various research. Although Elijah was also a research madman, he hadn't quite reached the level of Mr. Rostron. Every day after working on the space propulsion project with Sarah and busying himself with Mr. Rostron's project, he returned home with only the laboratory on his mind. He only knew about this incident because his university dormitory group had been discussing her. He originally only casually took a look, but he didn't expect to see a familiar name. Bessy Miller. After reading the whole thing, he then realized her impressiveness. She comes with a halo.
"Bessy, Did you really come to the Research Institute for your ideals? He couldn't help but exclaim. The salary of the grassroots researchers was too low. Many of the experienced people at the grassroots levels whom he knew had been forced to do other things because of the difficulties of reality. Other people persisted because of their dreams. Unless they reached Mr. Rostron's status, the road to becoming research and technical personnel was not as easy as what outsiders imagined. After a research project concluded, the bonuses from the award were just a drop in the bucket. Hearing this, Bessy paused for a moment, looked up at Elijah and softly said after thinking a while, "I'm not as great as them." She looked away after saying that. Standing there, Elijah stared at her back, feeling strange. What did she mean? Who was she referring to? For the next few days, Bessy stayed in the laboratory. Marvin delivered meals to her at noon, so she didn't go to the cafeteria and managed to avoid the crowds of people around Northwestern University's campus. Some people in the laboratory recognized her, but they were mostly busy researching and weren't as scary as the fans outside. It was Saturday in the blink of an eye. Having busied herself for a week, she finally had time to rest and returned to the Park Place apartments to meet Tucker's teacher. Michael drove the car to James's place, but she didn't let him go in with her. She unfastened her seatbelt. Looking up into his cold eyes, she felt a sense of inexplicable pressure from his emotionless stare. "Jack is also here." Bessy glanced at him. "Your face is well known to the big families in Evanston, right?"
"I haven't stayed much in Evanston ever since I was 16. Jack doesn't know me."
Michael coughed and slowly answered. In disbelief, Bessy directly opened the door and then closed it with a bang. She bent over and knocked on the window with her fingers, signaling Michael to lower it. As the Clark family's crown prince, how could Jack not know you? Putting her hand on the window, she smiled and then pointed at her forehead. "Although I'm busy researching the project, I still have my brain."
"Fine."
With his hands on the steering wheel, Michael's cold eyes were like crushed starlight, and he couldn't help chuckling.
"Whatever you say. Tell me in advance before you leave later."
Bessy retracted her hand, took a step back, and headed towards the building while casually waving to the back. Only when her back disappeared into the building did Michael look away. He put on his Bluetooth headset and reached out to dial a number. At the same time, Bessy entered the gates. Stopping there, she turned back and saw Michael's car drive away a few seconds later. Only then did she walk to the elevator and casually press the button. It was Saturday, but not many people were around. She didn't have to wait long for the elevator door to open. Once inside, her phone rang. She took it out and saw that it was Jared. Counting the elevator floors, she directly picked up. "What's the matter?" On the other end, Jared was still in his house, walking downstairs.
"Just now, Clarissa sent me something. There's an order for 50 times the commission. Do you want it?"
Ding! The elevator reached its floor. Getting out, instead of immediately entering the apartment, she walked a few steps towards the top of the stairs and answered neatly and concisely, "No." Walking around the kitchen, Jared opened the refrigerator door. He looked for something to eat inside and calmly said,
"The client is Michael."
He didn't remember anything else, but he knew that in Chicago, Clarissa once told him that the first order Bessy took, by exception, was Michael's. Bessy paused. She leaned against the wall and was silent for a long while. "Send it to me."
"Are you taking it?"
Jared asked. Rubbing her temples, Bessy sighed. "I'll take a look at it first." She was afraid he was checking on her.
"Okay."
Jared searched for a long time before finding a bag of chips.
"If it's no problem, I'll take it as a silent acceptance. I'll have Clarissa sort out the information and send it to you in an hour."
They hung up. Bessy stood by the stairs for a while before walking back. Inside James's apartment, Jack and Mr. Rand had arrived long ago. Tucker finally had a break from studying. Sitting on the sofa, Mr. Rand chatted with Jack, who was very cautious with him. The doorbell rang. Tucker's door opened and he immediately ran out like a whirlwind to open the door.
"His sister is here."
Jack also stood up and walked to the door with a smile. Mr. Rand's English was very good, and he had no obstacles in his communication. Upon hearing this, he couldn't help but look at the door. Having been here for a while, it wasn't the first time he heard the Miller family mention Tucker's sister. He had been curious about this mysterious sister for a long time. Tucker was undoubtedly a good student, and Mr. Rand was also amazed by his talent. This was the first time he saw Tucker reveal childlike behavior. He kept his eyes on the door, waiting to see Tucker's sister. Tucker opened the door and a woman walked in, wearing a beige coat with a shabby scarf in her hand. She was tall and slender, with delicate, beautiful eyebrows and cold eyes. She exuded a sense of dauntlessness.
"Teacher, this is my sister."
Tucker turned with his chin lifted and introduced Bessy to Mr. Rand, his eyes extremely bright. Jack also very respectfully introduced her to Mr. Rand.
"Miss, this is Mr. Troy Rand, the very good teacher that Zeke found from Austria."
Speaking of this, he paused and wondered if Bessy knew about Austria. However, Mr. Rand didn't respond to the introduction and just stared intensely at Bessy. Jack turned and asked, puzzled,
"Mr. Rand?"
"Mr. Rand, hello." Bessy politely greeted him. Both Keith and Ricky also stood up and respectfully greeted her.
"Hello."
Troy returned to his senses, still staring at her.
"I've seen you before."
The room was warm, so Bessy undid the buttons on her coat. While thinking of the 129 order, she looked up upon hearing this, feeling a little strange. "You've seen me?" She had a photographic memory. Although she might not remember names, she would surely have an impression of everyone she met. But she didn't have any impressions of Troy.
"Mr. Rand, you've always been in Austria. How could you have seen Miss Miller before?"
Jack looked at him. Coming out of the kitchen, James's eyes lit up, and his voice sounded a little excited.
"Mr. Rand, did you see her on TV? Do you like to go online too? Bessy is even more popular than celebrities online now. You must have seen a picture or video of her online." "Celebrity."
Troy realized that he wasn't being polite by staring, so he looked away and shook his head.
"I don't think so."
He had just arrived in Evanston and didn't know many people in Evanston. He still talked to his friends in Austria and hadn't made any new friends yet. Other than teaching Tucker on normal days, he was also preparing for the written entrance examination for the World Poker Tour Corporation. Bessy and Tucker sat down on the sofa to the left.
"Then where did you see her?"
Jack picked up a teacup and glanced at him. He didn't seem to be joking. Troy was silent for a moment.
"At the beginning of last year's social event in Austria, I was beside Mr. Bright."
He paused and glanced at Bessy.
"Where are you studying now?"
The confusion in Jack's eyes was obvious as he squinted.
"Miss Miller is now at Northwestern University studying computer science and nuclear engineering and is very impressive. How could you have met her at an Austrian social event?"
With Troy's major, his event must have been a gathering of talented engineering masters.
"Computer science and nuclear engineering?"
Troy was less skeptical now.
"Then I might have remembered wrongly." "Mr. Troy, is your interview process with the World Poker Tour going well?"
Jack changed the subject. Still pondering over the previous matter, Troy picked up his teacup, returned to his senses, and politely replied,
"I've already submitted the information and am still waiting for the notification on my resume. I hope it can be approved."
At this point, he suddenly cheered up, and his brown eyes lit up. Holding a teacup, Bessy looked sideways at Tucker, who was playing games. Upon hearing that, she looked up at Troy. "Interview?" Jack helped him to explain.
"Miss, you might not know, but Mr. Rand is an international senior software engineer. He came to the World Poker Tour's headquarters specifically to enter the IT department. It seems like his idol is inside the World Poker Tour, but Mr. Troy, you'll definitely pass."
Hearing this, Troy shook his head and laughed.
"It isn't so easy to enter the IT department. I'm only 30% confident that I will make it."
Episode 376. Truth about the Miller family.
"So exaggerated?"
Jack was shocked. Software engineers were divided into levels. Software technicians, assistant software engineers, and senior software engineers. Not many people could obtain the title of an international senior software engineer. One of the reasons Jack and the others respected Troy so much was because of his reputation in Austria's IT industry.
Jack, Poppy is back now, and countless engineers want to squeeze into the World Poker Tour. Mr. Rand's words aren't exaggerated at all.
Ricky shook his head.
The intelligence engine has almost spread all over the world, and everyone is using Poppy's artificial intelligence management model. Just the name Poppy can cause all the international senior software engineers in the IT industry to try to apply.
Exactly. Troy sighed.
This is the first recruitment within the World Poker Tour in 3 years. As far as I know, there are at least 10 international software engineers from all over the world trying to get in.
All of them are at the international level?
Jack was shocked. Only a few software engineers in the world could reach the international level, right?
Mr. Troy, you must enter the team with Poppy and Mr. Bright.
Ricky turned to Troy with an excited expression.
If you see Poppy, you must get me an autograph.
Bessy wasn't listening anymore and just looked down to slowly drink her tea. She couldn't help but take out her phone with her other hand and send a message to Mr. Cheatham. Is the team recruiting people? He was usually busy, but he replied to her within 3 minutes.
Someone ran to another department, so we lack people.
Bessy coughed and didn't dare to reply to him. A while later, he sent another message.
It's very useful to advertise with your name. Many people submitted resumes. Do you want to filter through them?
Without waiting for her to reply, he directly sent her a compressed file. Bessy downloaded it, but instead of looking at it in the main room, she went to Tucker's room and sat down in front of the computer to look at the resumes. Those who were initially selected by the staff were all senior international software engineers. Bessy glanced through them and saw 31 people from all over the world. Outside the room, Jack and the others were still listening to Troy talk about the IT industry. Bessy and Tucker had left without them noticing as they were too devoted to the World Poker Tour's affairs. It was soon lunchtime. Walking out with a pot of soup, James called them to the table. Keith, Ricky, and the others went to get the rest of the dishes from the kitchen. When Bessy came out, James immediately asked,
"Why didn't Michael come today?"
Bessy looked up at him and said expressionlessly, "He's busy." James had always trusted Bessy and didn't have any doubts about this excuse.
"He's so busy as a doctor,"
he sighed. After speaking, he went to the kitchen and brought out the last of the dishes. James's cooking skills were praised by everyone. After dinner, Mr. Rand took Tucker back to his apartment to have their lesson. Bessy didn't leave immediately and just sat on the sofa, waiting for Clarissa to send Michael's order. On the sofa, Jack was talking to James when the phone in his pocket suddenly rang. He took it out and saw that the fourth son's phone number was displayed on it. His pupils shrank and his muddy eyes glazed over with a layer of hostility. He stared at the phone for a long while and didn't answer. The phone automatically hung up. James brought another bowl of dessert over.
"Jack, are you okay?"
"I'm fine."
Jack returned to his senses. James simply nodded and then went back to the kitchen to continue washing his dishes. Within a minute, Jack's cell phone rang again. Bessy looked up. "Jack?" Returning to his senses, Jack smiled at her, then took his phone outside to accept the call. When he returned from answering the call, Jack couldn't hide his bad mood. "Are you okay?" Bessy looked down at her phone. Clarissa had already sent Michael's order. Bessy put her phone into her pocket without looking at it and then looked up at Jack inquisitively.
"It's okay. It's just a little problem with the company."
Jack looked up and gently smiled at her, his expression cryptic. Seeing how Jack didn't want to speak about it, she paused, silently stood up, and said in a calm voice, "Okay, I'll go back now then."
"You're going already?"
James came out of the kitchen with a spatula. Bessy walked to the door and put on her coat. Upon hearing this, she tilted her head and calmly glanced at him. "Yes, I have matters to attend to." James knew that she was busy with a project for school and walked her to the door without another word. The door closed beside her, and he continued to wash the dishes in the kitchen. Sitting on the sofa, Jack's smile gradually disappeared. Sitting not far from Jack, Keith glanced at James in the kitchen and couldn't help saying in a low voice,
"Jack, why didn't you tell the truth to Miss Miller?
How could I tell her the truth?
How could I say that the Miller family isn't doing well? That the fourth son has found out about Tucker, and that if he fails to pass the assessment to be considered an heir of the Miller family, the direct line will never get out of their predicament? How could I say that, due to our incompetence, we have put our whole bloodline in a dilemma?
Jack shook his head and bitterly smiled.
How dare I tell her about the Miller family's predicament now?
Jack knew that his attitude hadn't been good at the beginning. Bessy had only been recognized by Zeke alone, and he didn't have the guts to tell her about these things.
Zeke specifically instructed me not to trouble Miss Miller with the Miller family's issues, as she's busy with her research now. It's enough for us to worry about this matter. What can she do if we tell her? It's just one more person worrying.
After filming 24-Hour Idol, Zeke had mentioned this to Jack upon his return to Evanston, and Jack always kept it in his heart. In the past week, he had also heard from Tucker that Bessy was busy studying. Upon hearing this, Keith glanced at him and sighed without saying anything. Jack's face sank and his eyes looked serious.
The most important thing now is Tucker. There's still a tough fight ahead. Mr. Rand also said that he's very talented. During this period, the most important thing is to ensure his safety and to protect him from the fourth son's antics.
Will the fourth son even let Tucker pass the exam?
Keith shook his head. The fourth son didn't seem so easygoing. The most important thing at stake now wasn't Bessy, but how the fourth son would make things difficult for Tucker. Tucker's training in the last half a month was the most important thing. Thinking of this, Jack looked down at his phone, having received a new standard for Tucker's test. The Miller family's main strategy was focused on the domestic IT industry, where the direct line from the technology side generally met the standards. But the fourth son was sure to make a move. Looking at the standards sent over, Jack opened the door and went to the other side of the hall. Troy's door was open, and inside he was teaching Tucker how to develop a database in the living room.
Jack?
Troy raised his head and asked in surprise.
What's the matter?
Jack glanced at Tucker but didn't immediately speak. Troy quickly realized that Jack couldn't speak in front of Tucker, so he put down his book and walked outside with him.
Mr. Rand, take a look.
Jack showed him the new standards on the phone.
Can Tucker reach this standard?
Mr. Rand took it and slowly thought about it without immediately answering. The assessment was half a month from then, in early January. Jack stared at him, clasping his hands tightly. After a long while, Mr. Rand returned the phone, his brown eyes gleaming.
Yes, he can pass.
Really?
Jack's pupils dilated slightly and he looked overwhelmingly surprised. His old body trembled slightly as he said,
Are you serious? This standard is so high.
No, listen to me.
Mr. Rand shook his head and fell silent for a while.
Tucker isn't just a genius. His foundation is very good, and I think someone has been consciously cultivating him since he was young. This kind of standard is challenging for him, but with good training, it's not particularly difficult. I want to ask, is there a powerful person behind him? Someone who has shown him books?
Troy was wondering how this person had cultivated Tucker. Taken aback, Jack realized he knew nothing about Tucker's growth.
You mean someone consciously cultivated him when he was a child? That's impossible.
He had seen James's environment, and besides James, Tucker's mother's family were ordinary, materialistic people. Who could possibly consciously cultivate Tucker?
No, that's weird.
Troy was obviously puzzled.
His thought process.
They exchanged a few more words before Troy returned to continue teaching Tucker. Outside, Jack's feverish mind quickly calmed down after the surprise. He took out his mobile phone and called Zeke to report the good news.
The fourth son will never expect this.
Zeke was also surprised. Jack expressed his doubts.
Mr. Rand said that it seems like someone consciously cultivated Tucker when he was a child. That's really strange. Is someone really cultivating him?
On the other end, Zeke was flipping through the script when he heard this and suddenly paused. He remembered what James had told him about how Tucker would often skip class to find Bessy. In the Park Place apartments, they always huddled around the computer. According to James, Bessy had given many books to Tucker. In the past, Zeke really thought that they were just playing and discussing games. After all, Bessy had recorded game videos for Tucker, which he had shown to him. But now, thinking of what the manager had said before, Zeke realized that the person who consciously cultivated Tucker was probably Bessy. When Bessy left the Park Place apartments, instead of contacting Michael, she directly drove to the Hacker Alliance. At the 129 Street intersection, she got out of the car, put up her windbreaker's hood, pulled her scarf high, and went straight in through the doors. She happened to have time today and had come to investigate the Miller family's affairs as well as look into Michael's list. Episode 377, 129 Club. Inside the elevator, while sending a message to Jared, she flipped through the general information sent to her by Clarissa. After reading the first 10 lines, her eyes paused on the last line. 712. Ding! The elevator door opened. She stood in the elevator and didn't walk out. Jared, waiting outside the elevator door, buttoned his coat and asked,
"Are you okay?"
No. Bessy shook her head and got out of the elevator.
"Have you seen what Clarissa sent?"
Jared led Bessy to the office and opened the door for her.
"The 712 incident was blocked off personally by you previously. Even if this order didn't specifically ask for you, the others wouldn't pick it up either."
Walking to the restroom in the office, Jared poured out 2 cups of coffee and pointed to the sofa.
"Sit."
Bessy sat on the sofa. Without looking at Jared, she asked, "Are there other computers?"
"No, just check whatever you want directly at this one."
Jared sipped his coffee with his legs propped up. He lifted his chin and pointed to the computer on the desk. Bessy directly went to the computer and began to check on the Miller and Bright families' information. Jared glanced at her for a while and couldn't help but raise an eyebrow.
"Is my computer password non-existent?"
Bessy didn't even look up. "What's wrong?" Jared gave up.
"I just changed my password."
"I'll pay more attention next time." Bessy slowly replied to him and then continued browsing the 129's database. In 5 minutes, Bessy finished browsing all the information before putting on her scarf, deep in thoughts. Standing by the elevator, she pulled up her scarf, opened Samuel's profile with her phone, and sent him a message. "Do you have time next week?" The elevator door opened and she pressed on the first floor button. The elevator on the opposite side of the hall arrived at the exact same time. It slowly opened to reveal a slender figure standing inside it.
"Miss Flake, over here, please."
Outside the elevator door, the staff member bent over slightly. Sherry shifted her gaze from the elevator opposite and politely turned to the staff. "Was there a guest here just now?"
"I'm not sure."
The staff shook his head. Sherry nodded and stopped asking questions. The elevator door had closed too quickly, and she only managed to see a vaguely familiar figure. Bessy took a taxi back to the Highline apartments. At this time, Rosemary and Michael were sitting in the living room on the first floor.
"I heard from Patrick that you're dealing with a headache at 129.
Rosemary raised her hand to check the time on her wristwatch. It was almost 4 p.m., but Bessy had yet to send a message. She looked up at Michael, afraid that he had been abandoned. But she didn't dare to ask him. Michael put a cigarette in his mouth and casually mumbled something.
"Any idea?"
Rosemary looked at him and raised an eyebrow. Michael didn't answer, but Patrick, who was coming upstairs, couldn't help but shake his head.
"No reply, but it seems difficult. If it's Michael, shouldn't it be easy?"
Secretary Peterson sat down on the other side of Rosemary. He pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose and slightly tilted his head. He didn't know much, but he understood that Michael had power behind him. His inexhaustible money alone was a powerful point in his favor.
"Do you know who the person is that he asked for?"
Patrick quietly glanced at him. When he said that, Secretary Peterson and Rosemary made a guess.
"I'm guessing it's someone important."
Sitting next to Secretary Peterson and pouring himself a glass of water, Patrick said,
"It's not just anybody."
It was pretty obvious who they were talking about. Rosemary crossed her legs and gleefully looked at Michael.
"Oh, then that's difficult. I heard that Lone Wolf's last order was last year. It's more difficult to work with him than to succeed in your monthly surgery."
Why don't you ask Sherry?
Looking up at her with a lukewarm expression, Michael slowly played with his lighter, but didn't turn it on. Seeing his behavior, Rosemary also became serious.
It's better to find internal personnel for this kind of thing. What you want to check should be very important, right? Sherry is now a potential 129 intermediate member. She'll have the means.
Before she finished her sentence, Michael looked up and glanced behind her. Michael's expression. Rosemary stiffly looked behind her and immediately shut up. Putting the key on the cabinet and taking off her shoes, Bessy's expression was casual and light. Michael took the cigarette calmly out of his mouth and tossed it aside. It fell very accurately into the trash can behind the sofa. He scooted aside and gave her a spot on the couch. He reached out to pour a cup of tea, then turned sideways and handed her the cup with his eyebrows raised.
Why didn't you call me?
His fingertips touched her hand. It was quite cold. It was too troublesome. Bessy leaned against the sofa and took a sip of tea. What were you guys talking about? Rosemary lowered her head and only motioned to Secretary Peterson with her eyes.
We were talking about Miss Flake.
Secretary Peterson hurriedly said.
Miss Miller, you've been busy experimenting and might not know, but Miss Flake is the only intermediate member of the 129 Club. 129 only recruited one person last year. I heard the questions were so perverse that she was the only one who passed the entrance examination, and later was promoted to an intermediate member. She's very impressive. Michael happened to have a problem, so Chairman Clark was asking him to contact Miss Flake.
At the mention of Sherry, Secretary Peterson simply had to admire her. Even Rosemary admired her. Upon hearing this, Bessy remembered Sherry. Back in Chicago, Marvin and the others had mentioned her several times. She had heard about her intermittently. Jared's selection of members was based on comprehensive consideration of all aspects, and it wasn't surprising that Sherry had been recruited by them and promoted to an intermediate member in a short time. Bessy held the teacup, deep in thought. Opposite her, Rosemary saw that she wasn't speaking. She turned to Secretary Peterson and motioned for him to shut up.
Bessy, you actually turned out to be Noah's composer.
Rosemary originally only wanted to change the topic, but she had become extremely excited when she remembered to ask about this.
How do you do it?
Gathering her thoughts, Bessy couldn't help rubbing her temples. She only said a few words before immediately returning upstairs. Downstairs, Rosemary continued to chat with Patrick and the others about this topic. Upstairs, Bessy hung her coat in the cabinet and opened her notebook computer. The main page was a vast blue sky. After pouring herself a glass of water, she sat down in front of the computer, pressed a few keys and opened her social account. She logged in and clicked on the resume list Mr. Cheatham had sent her. Out of the 31 people, a few were particularly outstanding, but all the others were similar. 20 people needed to be chosen for the written test. After reading all the information, she focused on Troy. His resume was very impressive, mainly focused on his personal accomplishments and how he had participated in many international projects. Bessy was surprised. Zeke had high methods and had actually managed to invite him over from Austria. After reading all the information, she finally chose 20 people and directly sent the list to Mr. Cheatham. Then, she logged out of her account and sat on the chair thinking for a while, before pressing the keyboard again. The blue sky on the desktop instantly disappeared, and the all-black editor page popped up. She drank half a glass of water and looked at the display screen. She typed out a string of commands on the keyboard with her slender fingers. White codes appeared on the black background. A green progress bar quickly popped up in the lower right-hand corner of the computer, showing progress at 29%. She only stopped after entering all the instructions. Leaning back in her chair, she slowly picked up her cup and squinted at the progress bar. The progress bar slowly rose to 51%. Suddenly, her phone rang. It was a phone call from Jared. She paused for a moment and then reached out to pick it up.
Are you attacking our system again?
On the other end of the phone, Jared stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, pressing his aching forehead. Bessy was speechless. She had designed 129's defense system herself, but now she couldn't break it. She had to ask Jared to let her in every time she wanted to check information. The biggest breakthrough would be to surpass herself and break through 129's defense system. It wasn't the first time she'd tried to do this. Taking her silence as admitting it, Jared didn't know whether to laugh or cry.
You, Lone Wolf, please relax. The children in the technical department were so frightened just now.
Upon hearing that 129 was attacked and a patch was even added, the technical department had called Jared in a panic. Sorry, Bessy said and picked up her cup.
Stay concealed next time and don't scare them.
Jared, on the other hand, was used to it. 129's system was originally sponsored by Bessy for free. Forget about other hackers. Even Bessy herself couldn't attack it successfully.
We can just upgrade the system whenever you succeed.
More than 1 or 2 hackers wanted to hack the 129 headquarters system every day. It was said that this year's Black Hat Conference was a group of hackers targeting 129's systems. Jared had discussed this with Bessy, but her hacking skills spoke for themselves. She often tried to attack the system, not just to break through it, but also to find vulnerabilities so as to upgrade the system before other hackers could attack it. It was just that this time, her movement had been a little... She had scared the newcomers. Holding her phone with one hand, she pressed a few keys with the other and dropped the attack. I wanted to try to find someone.
Who? I'll help you get the information.
Jared raised an eyebrow and turned on his computer. It was Sherry. It's nothing. It's okay. Bessy leaned back in her seat. I'm hanging up. After hanging up, Jared stared at the phone for a long while, smiling helplessly. He picked up the landline and called the technical department, telling them that it was Lone Wolf testing the safety of the system. Jared's original intention was to reassure the technical department. Unexpectedly, the technical department went even crazier. Episode 378, Bessy's SCI Paper. Bessy had just dropped her attack and opened the ICNE research folder when someone knocked on the door. It was 3 rather light knocks. Without turning around, she clicked on the database for the last experiment. Come in. Michael came in with a plate of fruit and placed it on her table. Instead of immediately leaving, he half leaned against the table, watching her type on the computer, and pausing for a while.
I'm not familiar with Sherry.
He spoke unhurriedly. Bessy continued scrolling down the document without answering.
We've never exchanged words before.
Michael looked down at her and calmly said,
Unlike you, in the cafe last time.
Bessy finally paused and looked up at him. I'm not familiar with her either, she interrupted. Michael had only casually mentioned it, but was intrigued by her reaction.
Really? Last time in Austria, Christopher told me that someone touched your head.
He gestured with his slender hands, his expression rather indifferent. He sold Christopher out without hesitation. Bessy was speechless. Far away in Austria, Christopher was browsing his mail when his computer screen suddenly turned black. 20 minutes later, Alexander, who was asked by Christopher to repair his computer, sent a picture to the group chat, followed by a message.
Christopher was watching porn.
Marvin replied with several question marks. Meanwhile, Patrick was more direct.
What genre?
Terry clicked on the screenshot and couldn't help but send an impressive emoji before replying.
I couldn't tell. Christopher, you appear so dignified, but you actually value such small films.
Christopher couldn't say anything in reply. At the Miller family's headquarters, sitting at the table, the 4th son's expression slightly changed after listening to his subordinate's report.
Does Tucker really have such a talent?
It's true. The man lowered his head.
No wonder.
He tightened his grip on the files and looked up with sharp eyebrows.
No wonder Jack has been so strange recently. I thought he had given up struggling.
The subordinate was concerned.
Sir, what should we do now if Tucker passes according to the regulations?
10% of the shares in the headquarters will be transferred to him.
It'll be even more difficult for us to move against him then.
The 4th son tapped his fingers on the table and thought for a while before saying,
Call Tanner over.
Tanner Miller was a young descendant of the Miller family with outstanding talents, much better than the direct descendants of the 4th son.
You mean?
The subordinate thought for a moment and understood his meaning. The 4th son nodded silently. Nodding in understanding, the subordinate went out to find Tanner. In the study, the fourth son slowly smoothed out the documents. He didn't expect Tucker's talent, but now he could make use of Tanner. He could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Without Tucker, Jack's direct descendants weren't to be feared. Not long after this, the subordinate came back with a tall man behind him. "Sir." The man quietly glanced around the study and bowed slightly, his voice respectful. Still holding the documents, the fourth son's eyebrows now looked relaxed and more approachable.
"Oh, Tanner, how does it feel to be an intern at the headquarters?"
"Thank you for your concern, Gabriel. Everything is well."
Tanner nodded.
"There might be one more person joining next month. I'll have to trouble you to take care of him."
The fourth son smiled, seeming to admire that person very much. He asked a few more questions and then let Tanner go back to rest. The subordinate took Tanner out of the study. Outside, Tanner went downstairs and finally paused at the door. He lowered his voice and asked,
"Sir, the fourth son just said there would be another person."
The subordinate hesitated. Seeing his strange expression, Tanner already had doubts in his heart. But instead of asking immediately, he returned to his room and asked some people to check on the fourth son's information. After he left, the subordinate stared at his back, his hesitant face gradually hardening.
"Sir,"
he returned to the study and bowed before reporting to Gabriel.
"Tanner has probably started investigating Tucker."
The Miller family had always been in the direct line, and those with the ability to win the support of the headquarters' top management could then secure the patriarch position. With the deaths and disappearances in the Miller family's direct bloodline, as well as the emergence of the fourth son under the support of the Flake family, the Miller family's senior leaders all understood the current situation. Tanner was the most prominent person in the secondary bloodlines. Without a direct bloodline present, he was the most hopeful to take over the position as the next patriarch. But now, the Miller family's direct bloodline has returned.
"Zeke has kept the news about Tucker hidden very well. If it weren't for Anne, we might not have found out. Tell someone to leak the news to Tanner, but be smart about it."
The fourth son put down the pen and looked up with sharp eyes.
"This Tanner is good in all aspects, but his methods are too vicious, and he acts too impulsively. His style is very similar to mine, but I don't know if Zeke will let him go after this."
He laughed and looked down to continue practicing his calligraphy calmly and steadily. On Monday, Bessy arrived at the laboratory at 6:30 a.m. When she changed into her protective clothing and went in, Mr. Rostron was already inside, adjusting the sensor with his head lowered.
"You came just in time. This is the T-8-900 collider."
Mr. Rostron made way for her and pointed to several computers next to his torso.
"It's controlled by 18 closed-loop circuits equipped with 2 controller CPUs.
Fastening her last button, she walked to the innermost area of the laboratory and looked up at the patron collider. There were about 300 closed loops, 600 alarms, and nearly 20,000 radiation sensors. Not long after she came in, Elijah and Sarah rushed in.
"Bessy, why are you here so early today?"
Elijah brought the experimental equipment over and was a little surprised to see her. Looking away from the collider with drooping eyebrows, Bessy said in a relaxed tone, "I discovered something new about the project, so I came to test it out in the laboratory." Sarah ignored the two of them and turned to the experimental equipment in surprise. "A particle collider? Why is it here?" The metal equipment for the collider was extremely scarce, and there weren't many in the world. They were available only in the research institute. So the sudden appearance in the physics laboratory surprised not only Sarah but also Elijah.
"The research institute allocated it to the laboratory."
Mr. Rostron still sounded calm as he glanced at Bessy.
"Our new student won the resource."
Every year in the laboratory assessment, the outstanding students would be rewarded. Upon hearing this, Elijah paused and turned to her.
"Bessy, what did you do for the laboratory examination this year?"
Bessy coughed. "Nothing much." Sarah stood aside and remained silent. While Elijah was talking to Bessy, Mr. Rostron reached out to hold the frame and glanced at them.
"Yesterday I submitted an application to go to the underground reactor. They'll get back to us in about 2 days. You 3 should get ready."
Sarah was stunned. "Mr. Rostron?" Elijah thought for a while and realized something. Lowering his voice and putting a hand next to his mouth, he whispered to Bessy. Thanks to you, we can see the reactor for the second time. Given Bessy's importance to Mr. Rostron, this application to see the reactor was definitely meant for her. As soon as he finished speaking, Mr. Rostron turned, putting his hand on the edge of the table, and said a few precautions to Bessy. You should get ready. Seeing Mr. Rostron talk to Bessy, Sarah's grip tightened on her computer and her joints turned pale. After he finished speaking, she turned on the computer and walked over to him. Mr. Rostron, please help me look at my thesis. If there's nothing else to revise, I will submit it. Mr. Rostron put down the things at hand to slowly look through her thesis. Sarah had always been ambitious, so the content she showed him naturally wasn't bad. After reading it, he nodded slightly, looking quite satisfied. There's nothing to modify this time. Sarah finally heaved a sigh of relief. At the sudden thought of something, Elijah turned to Bessy. Bessy, I remember you said you're also writing an SCI paper. Remember to ask Mr. Rostron to help you revise it after you finish writing. His revised manuscript will never be rejected. While leaning on the table and carefully arranging the equipment, Bessy paused, then only muttered vaguely, Thank you, Elijah. Next to him, Sarah heard their conversation and turned to her. Bessy, you should write faster. You have to catch up with this season's journal deadlines. In the SCI Journal's Science and Technology editorial department, the editor in charge massaged his eyebrows. Most of the papers submitted in the last issue had been reviewed and more than half had been rejected. There aren't many quality papers, he said. The executive editor beside him handed him a cup of coffee. Most experiments don't see any novel results, and they spend a lot of effort on the wording and sentence formation. Those people who published the SCI papers overly pursued formalism, such that the SCI paper evaluation system was mixed with utilitarianism. The editor-in-chief and the executive editor reviewed manuscripts every day. Most of the papers barely showed any novelty and had been written entirely for the purpose of publishing an SCI paper. Almost 20% of the papers published last year hadn't been cited either. The editor-in-chief took a sip of coffee and nodded slightly. Let's read a few more articles and then knock off for the day. He reached out to open a manuscript. The title of the document wasn't rare. Compression Fusion Reactor. When he saw the title, he couldn't help but massage his brows again. He had seen similar titles more than once today. In the past 10 years, reactors had been a hot topic, but most of the students' content was either cliché or flashy. He took another sip of coffee before reading the document. This summary. He immediately put down his cup and sat up, reading further. Unlike other manuscripts, this one didn't have many flashy conjunctions. But the structure was complete and very logical. These were secondary bonuses, though, because the key was that the research perspective was extremely unique. This experiment? He immediately found the attachment and opened it. It not only described the composition of the equipment, but also divided the experiment into several components in great detail. Episode 379. What was the result of the experiment? Utilization rate is 52%? He looked up at the last series of data and immediately raised his head. He picked up his phone and quickly dialed Austria's Research Institute. The journal cooperated with laboratories in various countries. The phone was quickly connected after a few rings. I'm sending you a paper, he said. He stayed on the phone as he sent all the contents of the folder to the person on the other end of the call. See if the result of this experiment is feasible. Many students misinterpreted data or gave random results. The editors were very strict with these requirements and didn't easily believe whatever the students wrote. Hearing his anxious voice, the person on the other end of the phone in Austria's Research Institute was stunned. What was the result of the experiment? The energy conversion rate is as high as 52%. The editor-in-chief's voice was solemn. Our current research conversion rate for reactors is only 42%. If this experiment is the breakthrough it seems to be, energy research will have a new direction. 52%? The person in Austria was also shocked. He opened the mailbox and downloaded the document before reading through it. Which laboratory was this research done in? We didn't hear anything. Wait a moment, I'll take this to the professor. The editor-in-chief hung up and opened Bessy's contact information. There was only an email and address, so he sent her an email, but didn't receive any response. The executive editor walked over.
What paper was it that you had to call the Research Institute to verify the results?
Instead of replying to him, he just showed him Bessy's paper. After the executive editor read through it, he was frozen in shock.
If this is true, it's definitely the most quality paper we've received in recent years. This will bring novelty to the academic world.
The editor-in-chief took out a cigarette from his pocket and nodded. Neither of them spoke or left, even after it was time to get off work. They just sat waiting for the call. At 12:30 p.m., the telephone in the office rang. The editor-chief hurried over and answered it. Once he picked up, the editor-in-chief asked anxiously,
"What's the result?"
On the other end, a professor from Austria's Research Institute said in a serious voice,
"We did 2 experiments. One was 49.2%, and the other was 51.3%. Which team made this compression study? Do you have their contact information?"
The content of this issue had yet to be finalized. Although the editor-in-chief and the executive editor had worked overnight and waited from the morning until now for the phone call, they were still energetic and didn't seem tired at all. The results of each experiment differed due to the deviation of the quantity of energy and various other unavoidable factors. But even the lowest experimental result of 49.2% was much higher than 42%. This was undoubtedly a huge breakthrough in nuclear energy. The editor-in-chief sat down and exhaled deeply.
"I don't know their specific contact information, but I've already sent an email. If they reply to me, I'll inform you immediately."
The professor hung up. The editor-in-chief remained in the chair, silent. Watching him, the executive editor couldn't help but walk over and anxiously stare at him.
"What's the situation now? Was the verification result correct?"
Hearing his voice, the editor-in-chief looked up in a daze and finally regained his senses.
"The results didn't deviate much. This article doesn't need to be sent out to the 3rd round of reviews."
He clicked on his mailbox and checked his emails one by one to see if he had received a reply.
"Make an arrangement to replace the first-class article in the latest issue of the journal with this." "The first-class article?"
The executive editor looked at him. The SCI journal had different classes. It came out periodically every half a month, and the papers were divided into the first, second, third, and ordinary class. Other than the huge impact of these published articles, the estimated potential before publication was also very important. Every time, the editorial department received mostly articles in the ordinary class, and only 10% of the research papers reached the second and third class. As for the first class, generally only the professors at the research level could reach this class, and only one was selected among hundreds. The first-class article was placed on the cover page and published simultaneously in various subcategories and smaller newspapers. It happened once in a blue moon. Sometimes not even a single article could be found in a month. Fewer than 20 were published in a year. After a first-class article was published, the impact factor was at least 9. Academia evaluated a person based on the SCI papers, but based on the SCI system, a first-class article was also necessary to support their authority.
"Yes, first class. Very few people in the academic world have broken the energy limit."
After reading through all his emails, he took a deep breath.
"This article will shake up those research madmen in the laboratories. Bessy Miller. That's strange, I can't find any news about her. Is she a newcomer in the academic world?"
The editor-in-chief was now full of doubts. He could predict the explosion that this article would bring, and he couldn't wait for the other party's reply.
"Write a response and we'll email it."
He stood up and glanced at the executive director.
"Do it the fastest way."
At this time, Bessy was still working on her nuclear engineering project. Michael brought her lunch from the Highline Apartments, while Kara and the others were hurriedly responding to research matters and didn't have time to harass her about Nico. At 10:30 p.m., she left the laboratory. Michael looked at her as she entered the car and squinted her eyes, looking sleepy. He raised the temperature of the air conditioner in the car a little bit and drove back silently. When they reached the underground parking lot, she was asleep. The lights were dimmed inside. The parking lot was dark and gloomy, and only the headlights were turned on. Bessy's head was leaning against the window and her dark hair was hanging down her side. Michael put his hands on the steering wheel and tilted his head to silently watch her. His phone suddenly lit up, and before it rang, he directly silenced it with quick reflexes. He looked down and saw that it was an unregistered local number. He thought for a while, slowly opened the door, and then closed it behind him, making sure that Bessy was still asleep. He clicked on the phone number and called it again.
"What's the matter at this time?"
Michael lowered his voice even though the door was already closed. He took a few steps back and stopped by the pillar, glancing at the window and slowly speaking. The old voice on the other end spoke in a rather slow and respectful way.
"Is it convenient for you to come to the museum now?"
Still looking at the window, Michael's voice was lowered.
"Not now."
There was a pause.
"Then when is it convenient?" "Tomorrow morning or the afternoon."
He looked up and seemed to sigh when the passenger door to the car opened.
"We'll talk when we meet tomorrow."
He said goodbye to the person on the other end and hung up. Walking to the car, he opened the driver's door, bent down to remove the key and then locked the door. Bessy had already come out and stood to the side. Because she had just woken up, her usual sharp expression had faded, and she lazily yawned a few times.
"Where are you going tomorrow?"
"To the museum."
Michael walked over and glanced at her.
"You want to come with me?"
She definitely would have if she was free, but she was busy and had many things to do. She held her documents with the other hand and lightly sighed. "Forget it, I'll go next time." Silently, they returned upstairs at 11 p.m. Marvin naturally returned to his room, and the chef had already left work. Putting the documents on the table, she looked up and saw Michael entering the kitchen. As soon as the kitchen door opened, she smelled a very light aroma. Following him in, she realized he was standing at the stove, holding a spoon and slowly stirring the vegetables in a casserole. He had taken off his coat and rolled up his black sleeves, exposing his thin wrists. She walked in and looked down at the white casserole dish. "I'm really hungry."
"The chef left some for you."
Michael looked up at the time.
"It's almost ready."
He turned off the stove and then casually filled a bowl with some casserole, motioning for her to grab a spoon. There were cabinets everywhere in the kitchen. She casually opened 2 cabinets to find all the seasonings and continued to open the 3rd cabinet. Michael waited for a while and didn't see her, so he returned to the kitchen and found her looking around in a cabinet. She seemed annoyed. Glancing at her, he walked back out with a smile. Taking the casserole, he returned, walked over to her and calmly opened the cabinet above her head. Bowls, forks, and spoons were arranged neatly inside. Bessy was speechless. She remembered how James praised Michael's help in the kitchen. It seemed true. She sat down at the dining table and slowly ate the casserole. Michael sat down beside her and flipped through her documents. A lot of data needed to be sorted out. Some parts had already been sorted out by Kara and the others, and some were waiting for Bessy to fill it in. "Do you understand it?" Bessy crossed her legs and looked up at him. Turning a page, he glanced at her and calmly said,
"A little bit."
He hadn't majored in nuclear engineering or computer science, but in the past 2 months, ever since Bessy's assessment, he had helped her fill in data every night and was more or so familiar with it now.
"When you finish studying, perhaps I can even apply for a 4th major at Northwestern University."
He reached out for a pen to help her organize the thick stack of documents, speaking casually, but he sounded rather arrogant. "How many majors have you studied?" Bessy finished the last spoonful of casserole. Even though she had only wanted to major in computer science and nuclear engineering, Dean Soup and the others had repeatedly rejected her application. But in the end, they finally allowed her to take the exams. Episode 380. Escalated Incident.
"I majored in whatever I was interested in. 5 or 6 majors. I haven't finished my degree in 2 majors, though,"
Michael lightly said. After filling in the documents, he put the file in her hands.
"It's already 11:30 p.m. Go to bed."
He took the bowl and spoon and went to wash them in the kitchen. He glanced at Bessy, who was lazily leaning against the stairs on the 2nd floor with her long legs crossed and her arms folded across her chest. She held the document in one hand and casually tapped on the handrails with the others, the incandescent light reflecting her strange expression. Taking a piece of paper, he slowly wiped his hands and walked over with drooping eyebrows.
"Aren't you going to rest?"
She stood upright, tilted her head, and watched as Michael went upstairs. "I've considered your question." Michael's mind was on other things, but Bessy's words strangely caught his attention. Consider his question? His casual footsteps paused about 3 or 4 steps away from her. He was usually calm, but at this time, he was a little out of it as he looked over and asked in a slightly raised voice,
"Huh?"
"Nothing." Bessy looked away and continued slowly walking to her room with her documents. Michael paused for a few seconds and reacted. He strode over with his long legs and caught up to her within a few seconds. Smiling, he grabbed her hand from behind.
"No, you can't say that and then walk away."
Bessy raised her head and calmly said, "Yes, I just did."
"Okay, you're right."
Michael completely succumbed to her, dropping her hand. She kicked her door open and walked in. Before closing the door, she turned around again, glanced at Michael with the documents in her hands, and slightly raised her beautiful chin. "From today onwards, you have a new girlfriend," she casually said. Then, she took a step back and closed the door. But the door didn't close.
"I haven't tested my punching coefficient before, but it's probably 1800.
He hugged her from behind and chuckled in a low voice.
"If you close the door after flirting with me, aren't you a jerk?"
The underground reactor application submitted by Mr. Rostron was approved. On Friday, Sarah went upstairs to receive 4 sets of protective clothing. At 9 a.m., Mr. Rostron led them to the underground reactor. The temperature was a little low, but the air still felt muggy. They were silent in the long passageway. Both Elijah and Sarah had been here before, but Bessy was still unfamiliar with the place. It took 10 minutes to reach their destination. It was dark all around. The circular reactor had a radius of about 20 feet and a cylindrical vacuum glass cover on the outside that was about 13 feet high. Taking out an access card, Mr. Rostron turned to them and said in a rather distant tone, through the protective cover,
"Don't bang on anything after you enter. Pay close attention."
He swiped open the glass door with a magnetic card and led them in. Instead of entering, Bessy stopped at the door. Elijah went to say something to her, but realized that she hadn't followed. He backtracked a little and saw her still standing in front of the introduction plaque.
"Bessy, are you looking at the plaque?"
He followed her gaze and saw the words carved on the first row of the stone. Reactor built by Claudius Wilson. He had already read the inscription before.
"Mr. Rostron introduced us to it last time,"
Elijah said in a respectful voice.
"I heard that she was a very powerful first-level researcher in the Research Institute with high qualifications. She even taught Mr. Rostron's teacher."
The same level of researchers could have different qualifications. Mr. Rostron was a senior with relatively high qualifications among the first-level researchers. Bessy returned to her senses and silently nodded. The surrounding environment was dark, and Bessy had always been cold, so Elijah didn't find anything amiss. They went in together. The center of the reactor was a purple-black substance, like metal, but without the slightest metallic luster. This was a special substance that everyone in the reactor had studied until now, but had yet to understand. The center could also do experiments to stimulate reactions. Mr. Rostron took them through the whole operation before bringing them out again. 3 hours later, they returned to the laboratory. Mr. Rostron's face was expressionless, and his tone was a little light as he instructed Bessy.
"Last time, Elijah and another researcher wrote names after coming out. I won't introduce all the basic things inside one by one. You can take a look at what they have written. This time, you'll take the lead in the notes."
He silently returned to the innermost area to continue his experiment. In the outer area, Bessy glanced at Elijah. "Elijah, do you have the record sheet?" Elijah changed into his clothes and nodded.
"Yes, do you want to write your notes this time?"
"Give me a bit and I'll send it to your email later." "Thank you." She squinted lightly. She usually moved quickly, but her actions were extremely slow today. Elijah and Sarah had already changed into their special lab coats, but she was still unchanged. She just sat on the stool in the lounge for a long time, before slowly removing her protective clothing. In the laboratory, Elijah and Sarah both sat in front of their computers. Elijah looked at the last record and then looked around for a while before asking in a low voice,
"Sarah, do you still have the metal watch information that Mr. Rostron talked about last time we went to the reactor?"
Last time, Mr. Rostron had very quickly briefed them on a lot of content, so they had recorded different information. "Yes." Sarah closed the cover page. "Do you want it?" She turned to him and clicked on her own record sheet.
Elijah nodded. Send me a copy. Bessy wants to write her notes about the underground reactor. Sarah paused with her hands on the record sheet and silently pursed her lips. At this time, Bessy came in with her notebook. Elijah glanced at Sarah with darkened eyes. Mr. Rostron said that I'm responsible for the reflections of the reactor this time. Bessy slowly said, Elijah, Sarah, I'll hand over the list to Mr. Rostron later. No need, I'm busy with the SCI paper and don't have time for this. Sarah refused decisively. She had already written her notes last time and it hadn't been groundbreaking. This underground reactor had been there for so long, yet no professor had discovered anything new. Sarah didn't want to waste her time on this. Bessy had already filled out the list and looked up at her. Sarah squinted. You haven't already filled it in, have you? She directly took the record sheet from her and saw the names already filled in. Picking up a black pen, she crossed out her name and glanced up at her with a lukewarm expression. Bessy, you just came to the laboratory and might not know what an underground reactor is. This is a puzzle left by the respected seniors of the Research Institute. Rather than wasting time on this, you might as well spend more time on SCI papers. Sarah? Elijah finally couldn't suppress it. He stood up and coldly glanced at her. Bessy looked calmly at the record sheet in her hand and said, Sarah, I have a rough idea of the research conclusion. Sarah sucked in a deep breath. You only just got to the laboratory and don't have much pressure on you, so you can make mistakes. Elijah and I have been fighting for so many years and don't have time to goof around with you. Since Mr. Rostron has asked you to take charge of this matter, you can quickly write the research notes by yourself. Mr. Rostron had already asked them to submit their notes after going to the underground reactor last time. He clearly knew it was useless for them, so why did he specifically make Bessy responsible for this? Did he value her that much? Sarah pursed her lips. Ever since Bessy had entered the laboratory, she had begun to feel increasingly irritated and vaguely threatened. She threw the notebook on the table, turned off her computer, and directly went in to help Mr. Rostron. It was silent for a moment. Staring after Sarah, Elijah frowned and turned to look at Bessy. Bessy, I still have several points I have yet to figure out. Let's write the research notes together. Elijah, she turned towards him, but didn't know where to start. After a long while, she smiled. Actually, I'm not too sure about these research notes either. It's okay. It's the same as any research, Elijah said generously. He raised his phone and gently smiled. I've sent the recording information to you. Remember to read it later. After speaking, he turned around and walked to the innermost laboratory. Instead of going in immediately, Bessy took out her computer from her backpack, opened it, and placed it on the empty table to look at the documents. Once Elijah turned around, the gentle smile on his face suddenly disappeared. He walked to Sarah and was silent for a moment before saying in a low voice, I already told you that Bessy already has a teacher. We're not competing. You believe in everything she tells you? Sarah tilted her head with an unconcealed sneer. I believe you know who Mr. Rostron's teacher is. People are shamelessly advancing to be his student. You really take everything she says seriously? She finished speaking and left directly with the experimental equipment. Not far away, Mr. Rostron finally recovered from his thoughts. He turned to Elijah with a cold expression. Go to the communication room and get today's news. Okay. Elijah put aside his business at hand and went to the first floor. The communication room on the first floor was next to the guard's office outside the gate, with a window measuring 1 meter long and 30 centimeters wide. Mr. Rostron's mail is here. The guard handed a stack of issues to him. Elijah took the stack and thanked him. He had just turned around when he saw a letter in the last row of the small sorter. He was very familiar with this envelope. It was a special envelope for SCI journal papers with a watermark on it. He took another look and happened to see the recipient on the envelope. It was 2 words very familiar to him. Bessy Miller. He took it and confirmed that the address was their laboratory. Looking out at him, the guard couldn't help but ask, Do you know this person?